Greetings and welcome to this installment of our Frienderview series. Frienderview series, pronunciation is difficult. In which we sit, in which we sit down for a conversation with one of the many amazing people we're lucky enough to call friends, or would at least like to in the future. My name is Josh Sanders, and I'll be your host. On this episode, we have an incredible guest who I'm super honored to be speaking with, and I know you will thoroughly enjoy. I met King Williams at a tech hack designed to use technology to address the issues created by rampant gentrification in our city specifically. I know this is something that everyone's kind of up against right now. This series of weekends was hosted by Goody Nation and is also where my dear friend India and I began dreaming of ways in which we could use technology to help the Atlanta homeless community obtain identification, which is a huge problem in that community. A dream that she would later realize in the form of Mini City, which you can hear more about on her and her husband Sarab's Frienderview on her SoundCloud. And highly recommend you check that one out. I distinctly remember King's presentation at the Goody Nation event. King had directed a documentary titled The Atlanta Way and graciously shared a portion of it with the audience. The Atlanta Way provides incredible insight into the issues around gentrification and how there are basically two power dynamics in Atlanta, the Black way and the White way. As a white person who grew up in and around Atlanta, I'm ashamed to say that while I was aware of the power struggle between these two power monoliths, I was unaware of the extent to which the Black community in Atlanta was and still is negatively impacted. Though I have sadly not seen the entire doc yet, I would love to, by the way. The few minutes I experienced were pivotal in my own journey to search within myself for the blind spots in my privilege and how saying that Atlanta is my home is meaningless unless I also recognize and act upon the fact that it's our home, and until we are all treated equally, we cannot rest. King has a true passion and a wonderful heart for the city and for telling the stories that matter most to the Black community, into Atlanta, and even the world. In addition to being a documentary filmmaker, King is also the host of his own podcast called The Neighborhood Watch, which covers gentrification, urbanism, planning, and culture. King is also a journalist and author based right here in Atlanta, Georgia. King flexed his journalistic muscle for the Supporter Report for years and now has a freemium newsletter, which I'm going to let you explain in a minute, which can be found at iamkingwilliams.substack.com. I highly recommend you check it out and subscribe. I was poking around there the other day and found a lot of great stuff. He's also one of the most genuine and kind people you could hope to meet, and I'm just super delighted to have you on the show today, bud.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. I'm excited. So I always start with asking, how in the world are you?
I'm actually really good. I don't know how your other guests were, but I myself am very happy in the world. So
good. Okay. Part two of that question is, where in the world are you?
I am at home. So, I had to rush and get down here, which I'm really happy for. So, and I'm actually trying to read your questions as we as we talk. So, but yeah, I'm pretty good.
So you're in Atlanta and you've been here your whole life. Are you native? Did you come here via some other town?
No, most of my life I have lived here in Atlanta. I grew up out, particularly like in DeKalb County, like the East Atlanta Decatur border. So if you know Eastlake, Kirkwood, the non-city part of Decatur, like Candler Road, Boulder Crest, more like that entire corridor is kind of where I grew up at. I've lived most of my life there. And I lived in New York and New Jersey for, I would say maybe 15% of my life, but the majority of my life has been here in Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that, so you went to college, did you, in Atlanta? I think I remember you saying at one point. And then, tell me about that. So you went to college. Where did you go to college? And then what was life like right after that?
So I went to college in Atlanta. I went to Georgia State University. I had an excellent time for the most part. And like most people who went to Georgia State, I stayed in Atlanta. But because when I got out, basically it was like the crash was happening. So
2008 kind of?
Yeah. So there was nowhere to go. I knew this was happening. I was working at Red Lobster at the time. I had graduated college. I really didn't have a job. Like for real, I mean, working at Red Lobster is not a job. So
I've done it. I worked at Red Lobster.
I'm gonna take that back. It is a job, but
yeah, no. I mean, but it's not like
not during the crisis.
For this. Yeah.
that's the worst place to be as a restaurant during a crisis, as we see now. Like, that's just not where you want to be at.
That's a tough job anyway, because you're just constantly running for biscuits.
This is true. I tell people this all the time.
Dude, they don't understand. I was in great shape because I was always running after those damn buttered biscuits or cheese biscuits, cheddar biscuits.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. Like, when you go to Red Lobster, they actually have a thing. I don't know if they still do it on the menu where you could just like hit Cheddar Bay biscuits, and like that was it. Like, you didn't like people come there for the biscuits for the most part, and like the little endless shrimp thing, which was a nightmare. Endless shrimp is probably like
Lobster Fest, Shrimp Fest.
Yeah, all the fest. Like I have horror PTSD from that.
I do too, man. I do too. But I did love the biscuits. I've been on keto for about 2 months. I tell everybody.
Oh, word. How was that?
It's great. But if I got to be miserable, everyone else does. So I constantly talk about it. Like, gotcha. You know, when your friends become a vegetarian and they're like, oh my God, are you going to eat that steak? Do you know what that used to be, an animal? I'm that, but with carbs.
Oh, I used to be like that but no, I used to be a vegetarian. I was never like that because I would be like, man, meat is delicious. But for me, I needed to like get to a certain level, and I just couldn't do it by eating meat. So I
know. I felt bad. I feel like the worst people are like ex-smokers, and then it kind of is like
I know what I know what
you know what I mean? You're like, I quit smoking and I hate my life, so I'm gonna make everyone around me miserable. But then it works its way backwards, and then somewhere in that scale you've got like keto, and then you've got vegan, and then you've got people who are really into all that like Gwyneth Paltrow stuff. What's it called? Goop or
oh yeah, her witchcraft. I love seeing like what she's done with that. So I must stop. It's not witchcraft, but like the internet says it's witchcraft. I've never actually looked into it, so I'm gonna take that back.
She had a show on Netflix.
She does on Netflix. I
didn't watch it. Is it still on there? I feel like people pulled it because no one watched it.
Maybe. You know what? Now I'm gonna search for it tonight to see if it's actually on there.
Okay, better you than me. If you watch it, let me know what you think, because I don't know if I can handle that much Gwyneth Paltrow.
I never knew the hate for Gwyneth Paltrow. I just like, okay, she just seemed like another rich person to me. I never was like against her. I just like, oh, okay, Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah, I'm sure she's fine, but I also like there's that element of you grew up in a reality that's so far-fetched. Like her mom, Blythe Danner, was an actress. Like she grew up in a very famous sort of, a silver spoon in her mouth, and I think like she does pretty well to be relevant socially as much as she possibly can coming from that world. And I don't know, but I mean, also look at our president. Like, he never had to work a day in his life, and like he's such an asshole.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I know we'll get into that later in the show, so I'm just gonna leave that there for right now.
I'm just, it's just interesting to me. It's like, because people are constantly, that's the thing that they always say about people like Gwyneth Paltrow or Angelina Jolie. They're like, how can you be so out of touch with reality? I'm like, they've never been anywhere adjacent to reality. How could they have any idea of what reality is like?
Yeah.
They never worked at Red Lobster.
I think everyone should work at Red Lobster for character building. Like, I generally do. Like, I'm dead serious about that. I think everyone should work in some service-based job for character building.
I agree.
So
and you'll know how to tip.
This is true, but it's not even just the tipping. It's like, especially in this day and age, what I'm going to say pre-COVID, but especially when we get out of COVID, it's to be of service to someone is a humbling position. And so when you're a server, it doesn't matter what you were before. It doesn't matter who you were before. It's the position you're in now. So you think about the world very differently. And so I've been a server for probably the majority of my life in some aspect of it. So I have and everyone I know who's been long-term service have a different way of looking at the world. And I think that it's really something everyone should do for a living. I think everyone should do two things in America. Everyone should live three things. One, everyone should be a server. Two, everyone should live in New York for at least 2 to 7 years, no more than 7, because like that'll grind you down.
Can I do like 6 months and call it a wrap?
Nah, I say 2. And then the third thing is too, I think everyone at some point in time should really spend 1 year like pursuing something you really wanted to do in your life, right? So those are the 3 things I think you should do. But back to the number 2 part of it. The reason I say New York is because at least 2 years, because New York's such a different kind of city. No matter where you are, no matter how much money you bring, it has a certain way of like grinding out things about you that you didn't know you either liked or didn't like, in a way that I don't think any other place could really do in America. Like, it's just whether or not you're rich. Like, I'm talking about from Donald Trump rich all the way down to me, like a little guy who worked at Red Lobster. Just being there is it's a different mode. It's a different way of thinking. You have to be a little bit more resilient than I think people let on. And so that's what I say.
Definitely get that. It's like a proving ground, really, in a way.
Yeah, but you're proving it to yourself. Some people are trying to prove it for other industries, but you're really trying to prove it to yourself. Like, you know what? I
Yeah.
thought this was good, but like, no, this is a different thing. And I say this to somebody who's been homeless in New York. Like, it's a different ball game to be like homeless. I've never been homeless in Atlanta, but
Wow.
like from what I've seen from homeless in Atlanta versus being like homeless in New York, like
Yeah.
we're not playing the same game here. And it's a very different kind of thing.
Do you mind unpacking that just a tiny bit? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, because I have an idea. I've seen the documentaries where there's people who live in like this abandoned subway stations, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like underground. But how is it different apart from just winters being so shitty up there?
Winter is hell. Is it like it's
yeah.
But so it kind of ties into like even what you said before, like who I was. So I went to Georgia State. I got a job. I was working like just a regular job at FedEx for years afterwards of graduating. I was still working the Atlanta way, and that's how most people know me, right? So that was when I didn't have much money, but I had a lot of people from Georgia State who were still in college or graduating like over the course of some years. And so we were going around doing different like previews, and I really didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. It was like the blind leading the blind at that point. But we would do trailers, we would do short films, we would do like mini documentaries on gentrification in Atlanta.
That's awesome.
Or we do these things like Man on the Street, where we would interview different people. We put videos on Facebook and YouTube. But at this point, like YouTube still didn't have that critical mass where you could really get stuff tracking yet. So we had to basically put stuff on Facebook. And this is like a year before Instagram comes out. So basically all the time between like 2008, 2011. And so during that time, I just basically had to like, my crew was just like, we don't know what we're doing. And it was like, the cool thing is we're all cool with each other to this day. Like I'm still friends with all of them. And so at that point in time, I was like winding it down. Then I put out the clip that everyone kind of knows me about, like that, like it's like a 34-minute clip. And that kind of went really, really well. And then YouTube shut it down. And for like, this was like 2011. So back in the day, YouTube, when they shut your video down, you couldn't get that video back for like months, if not years.
Why did they shut it down?
Because they had like little copyrighted music in it, like
oh
always. And it really killed momentum, right? And so, I mean, like the first day, I think this was big for us at that point. We had like, I don't know how many views on Facebook, how many views on YouTube, but we had like 2,000 or 3,000 in like the day. And that was big for us.
Wow.
And then by like, but in the week, it was like, oh, we got like 10,000 views. But then they like shut it down for like years. So like years, I did not have that video. Like, but luckily people had knew it so much. So people would like copy the video, upload it somewhere else. I would see like people stealing. And I was like, okay, so it's out there. And it actually got me kind of thinking about where we are today, 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago now. And during that process, and so during that process, one of my really close friends, she had dropped out of Georgia State to work in political campaigns, and she knew I was really a fan of Spike Lee. And Spike Lee had first got on Twitter in February 2011. I know this because we were sitting in the computer lab at Georgia State University. She's like, "You need to be his intern." And I was like, "I don't know how." She's like, "You need to be his intern." She's like, "Just listen to me. I'm gonna develop out a campaign." She develops a full-on like digital campaign for me to be Spike's intern.
Holy shit.
So and so what that was at that point in time, this is still 2011. It was a series of tweets, emails to the office. The reason we had the emails because when he tweeted out, he was like, "If you're looking for an internship, talk to my man Jason." He put out Jason's real email address. And so what happened was she built a campaign around. Yeah, he didn't know. Like this was like his first tweet. It's not there anymore. And like, you first go, so you make general mistakes. The problem was you do that and you're Spike Lee, that's thousands of people who see your stuff. Thing is, nobody hit, and for some reason to this day, I don't know why nobody else didn't hit up his assistant, but it worked out for me this way. But so she built a campaign. The whole campaign is about how to show I'm a good person to be an intern for him, right? And so she got people I knew from like either the documentaries I did before, people I went to college with. I got people I worked with at FedEx at the time, people I knew from Red Lobster to either tweet Spike Lee or send an email to his place. And then eventually somebody got the number. So people were calling like daily for like 8 weeks. And so it's by April.
Man. That's nuts.
And so, and then by April, it got to a point April, I don't know, it was like late April. And he had so many incoming calls to his office that they stopped it. Somebody gave his assistant Jason my number. Jason calls me and we're talking for like 20 minutes. And I'm thinking that Jason is going to like fire me. I'm like, I don't even have the job, but I'm thinking he's going to fire me. He's going to like call the police on me for stalking or something. He's just talking to me. At the end of it, he was like, "Listen, man, I know what you're doing, man. Tell you people to stop and don't do that again." And I was like, all right, cool. So I got on Facebook. I messaged people. I was texting people like, "Hey, man, don't do that. Thank you guys so much." I talked to them. They don't have anything right now, but at least like we got the word through. And I was like, that's a second thing that kind of got going through my mind. How now in 2020, how kind of online would actually go to get people's attention. And so then out the blue, my birthday's in June. I know this. And I got a call and I saw the New York number. I knew it was a 718 number. And I was like, okay, I know this is a New York number. I got cousins in New York. I know what this is.
Yeah.
And so he's like, hey man, can you come here tomorrow? And I'm like, nah, because he called me on a Wednesday. He wanted me to come in on Thursday. And I was like, I live in Atlanta. I can't do that. He's like, I'm going to tell you this again. Can you come here tomorrow? I was like, no, man, but I know what you're saying, but I really, he's like, listen, Spike may have an opening for an internship. We need some interns. And I was like, listen, man, I live in Atlanta. I don't have a lot of money. Can you at least give me a week? He's like, all right, I need you a week from now. And so what happened was, it was really a little bit more than a week, but I remember I came back because I got there on June 17th, 2011. I remember that day because that was like a monumental day in my life. So I worked at FedEx. I had to quit my job immediately. Everyone knew at FedEx I was doing like short films. I was trying to get up and get on in the world. At that point in time, Spike they had already had people there. They were doing stuff. I didn't know this at the time, but when I got there, I quit my job. Obviously at FedEx. My aunt, the one I take care of now, we'll get into that later. She sent me some money. My mom and my dad were trying to figure out where I'm going to stay. So my dad called my aunt who lives in New York, and she's like, "Hey, can he stay with you for the summer?" And I was like, I don't know. And so my aunt, my cousin, they lived together in a really, really small apartment in the Bronx. And so they worked it. I was like, all right, cool. We got him, but he's got to stay for, they knew how long the internship was. He got to stay for only this time. Right. And so when I got there, I was like, boom, I get there. I remember this because I think this is kind of why I also say a thing about New York, because my cousin, her name is Keisha. And I know she probably will hear this at some point in the future and just be like, why you keep telling people this story? But this is true. So I get to New York June 17th. I fly into LaGuardia. My aunt pays for my ticket to go. The same manager I had at FedEx, he did me a solid where he didn't officially fire me until the day I got to New York. So that way I had one extra check coming in to suffice me, right? But then at that point, I had a little bit of money from my aunt that, like it was probably like $200. It might have even been just $500. She paid for my plane ticket, gave me $500. My check from FedEx, I have no problem saying this now, it was only $330 a week. So I had basically $830, right? But I didn't even have that because I had to pay off some bills and stuff. So when I actually came to New York, I only had $330. The other $500 my aunt gave me, had to pay off bills before I left.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm there with $300. When I get there, I get out to LaGuardia. I'd never been in New York before. Even though I have a lot of cousins, I just never had been in my life. My cousin Keisha meets me and she's like, all right, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about the subway today. This is what we're going to do. She's like, you got me today because I got to get off work for you. And so, you know, a very New York way, I got to get off work for you. It's like afternoon on a Friday. And so we get on I remember this now, she took me on a cab and we rode from LaGuardia all the way to the Bronx. At that point in time, she walked me around like to her neighborhood in the Bronx, gave me the lay of land. That was day one. The following day, we got up at like maybe 7. She was like, all right, I'm going to take you around everywhere you need to go. We're going to take the route down to Spike's office, how you would normally do it. So sure enough, she got me up early. We got up early. Well, I got up at the same time. And so we did like the entire place. I would probably go to New York from her place in the Bronx all the way down to Brooklyn where Spike's office is and back on the train. Then we went from there to other parts of Manhattan. We walked around. We saw different things, sightseeing. She's like, all right, this is what this is. This is what that is. And then when we got home, she's like, all right, this is your Metro card. I'm going to do you a solid. She gave me a Metro card. She's like, this is your Metro card for the week. You got to figure out how you're going to get your Metro card. You got to figure out everything else you need to do from here on out. Because when I go to work Monday, when your auntie goes to work Monday, we not going to be able to help you, whatever. We'll give you a key. And she did. And then she's like, you got to figure it out on your own. The good thing is, so at that point, I'm having to remember every single thing that she showed me. I had like a little BlackBerry at the time, and I didn't have anything else on me. I legit had 2 bags with some clothes and like toiletries and stuff, 2 small bags, a BlackBerry, and a 1-week Metro card from my cousin Keisha. And so I remember this because that following Monday, it had to be like June the 20th. I show up. I'm thinking I'm getting there because Spike, they was like, all right, we need you to be there now. I get there. I'm like, oh, I'm doing something. I get there at 8. I get there. It's like 8. I'm thinking I'm doing something, right? I'm going to be 8. I'm going to be early. They don't open up till 9. The gate's still on his premises. You can't get in anyway. You got to wait for somebody to let you in. There's 4 other interns who are already there. And so I was like, okay, this is what this is going to be like. And that's why I kind of get into New York thing was I'm coming from Atlanta. And then over the process of that morning and throughout that whole summer, I realized they had a bunch of interns, right? Because Spike was shooting a movie. It was called Red Hook Summer. It's not one of his best movies. I have no problem with saying that. But it was an independent movie. And I learned a lot about the business from that entire experience. It's just also like just what it means to be on film and be and stuff like that. But the thing is, we worked basically 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 6 days a week that entire summer, right? And so by the end of the summer, though, he had more interns, more crew. He had a full production. It's an independent film, so you still probably got like 50, 60 people on the independent film plus the interns. And at that point, we had like definitely a dozen interns or so.
Wow.
And so at the end of that, like that same guy, Jason, this is like, I remember this because I was supposed to be leaving like the week before. He's like, hey man, you think you come back in the fall? And I was like, I don't have any money. And he was like, we'll work something out. Just like he come back.
So it was not a paying internship.
Nah. So this is what would happen. So Spike has another woman, I'm not going to say her name, who handles his finances. And so what she would do with the interns is every day, because she knew we weren't getting paid, she's like, all right, I'm going to divvy up. Every one of y'all going to get $12 a day to eat. I also knew because Spike, when they had the movie going, like they have food, they already catered food. So I would keep the $12. That would be my $60. And so I saved that money. And that would be like, because it was 10 weeks. After 2 weeks, I had enough money for the Metro card and I had like enough money to pay like a small cell phone bill or something like that. Like
Smart.
nothing crazy. So that's what I would do. But when we weren't shooting, my cousin would still be cooking at home. So my aunt or something, I would just take their meals with me. Right. So I knew I always had food in my pocket, but I just had to do it like that. And so every day is 7 to 7 or sometimes 9, 10 o'clock at night. You're still back out there the entire summer, 6 days a week. I developed a relationship with people and other filmmakers and other interns and people in New York that I think I'll never change that experience. And the good thing is I learned more about New York because I had to be on my feet. I had to like walk everywhere, pick everything up, get on the subway and do everything. And so what happened was at the end of the summer, like a week before the internship was ending, Jason was like, hey man, I need everybody can stay for 2 more weeks. Spike has this event Labor Day weekend. And I was like, okay. I asked my cousin Keith, she's like, all right, cool. You can stay 2 more weeks. And so during that process, he was like, hey man, he was talking to me. He's like, hey, do you think you can, he was like, hey, you think you can stay a little longer? And I was like, I don't know, man. And so I was telling my cousin Keisha and she was like, what is it going to be? Are you gonna be making money? Cause she's like, listen, we're cool. We like you. We love you. But like I was like a little too passive on it and I wasn't paying no rent. And so,
how could you have paid rent though?
Yeah. And so, and it also too, like that place was small. It was literally like a 1-bedroom apartment with a shower that her and my aunt, they had a big enough bedroom. They just divided it in between. And then it was like a living room and a small kitchen. So, I mean, there are places, I'm pretty sure your living room was probably bigger than their apartment combined. So it's like a small space.
Oh, yeah.
But
people don't understand how small the spaces are in New York. You're like,
yeah,
people joke around about like, oh, I lived in a closet, and like
people do live in a closet,
friend
though.
who lived in a closet.
I know a lot of people who lived in closets though. Like this is not not a joke.
And probably paid like $500 for it, or something that we could get a 1-bedroom for here in Atlanta. Well,
very true. And that was my life, except I wasn't like putting any money in my cousin's pocket. Luckily, I wasn't doing too much for it, but just like, hey, this is a new person, it's new electricity, new rent, new water. Cause I'm like, it's an extra person that you weren't expecting. And so she was like, listen, man, I'm sorry, but nah, you can't. And so that day I'm going back again. I'm taking out my same aunt who gave me money to go up. She pays for me a Greyhound bus ticket. And I'm taking the Greyhound bus back down to Atlanta. He calls when I'm on the bus. He's like, hey man, Spike needs you here on Monday. I'm like, it's Labor Day week. He's like, no, Spike needs you back on Monday. So I get back on that Friday afternoon. I tell my parents, I'm calling through the thing. Problem is I don't have a place to stay now. So like I come back to Atlanta, I'm hanging out with my friends for like 2 days. A lot of them are happy to see me. I got to go back Monday. So my aunt found a hostel. And there was a problem with the hostel though. She could only get me a hostel. It was somewhere in Brooklyn that I had never heard of before, another part I'd never been to. And so I got one for Monday and I got one for Wednesday. And the problem was I didn't have any place to go on Tuesday. So that became an issue. And so Monday, it took me forever to find it. When I came back, I take the bus back, got there Monday, finally found the place. Had to leave, figure out where I'm gonna go. I think I ended up staying at a buddy's house that Tuesday. And then another place at Wednesday. And then Wednesday, I was back at the hostel, then at my buddy's place. Oh, and so then at that point in time, it became this thing like, all right, I got to figure out where I'm going to stay at. And so then I was homeless. And so I had this thing, I was now getting paid. Spike was doing like this 9/11 tribute commercial that they were going to air. Like it was really fast. They were already shooting it. So I came on at like the tail end of it. We worked on a 9/11 commercial. that was actually in August. And so that's when they brought me back. After they saw how good I did on that one, they kept me and they brought me back. But then he had this pilot for HBO that never got picked up with a young John Boyega, who was supposed to play young Mike Tyson.
No way.
Yeah, and like it was called The Brick, and it was set in Newark, New Jersey.
Holy cow. Can you see it anywhere? Is it on YouTube or anything?
No, I wish HBO would do this, but HBO has so many pilots. They probably have like 200 or 300 pilots of shows they never picked up.
They should release them. What's the harm in releasing them?
I actually do think they should do that for HBO Max in particular. Like this would actually be good to see.
I'd watch that.
I would too. And now I'm working on that. So I have a job. I'm making like basically the same amount of money, maybe slightly more than I'm working at when I was working at FedEx. I think it was like $500 a week, but in New York, that's like $200. Like that's not
like a meal.
Yeah. And so, but the thing is, like, I have a job, I'm working, I'm doing something that people really love, and still New York is like hella competitive. So I have this job, I have money, I'm working some prestige, I know I can get in, I'm making inroads, people love me, I'm working hard on set. But then at the end of the night, I'm like, people don't know this. I'm getting to work first because I know I need to leave my stuff at the office, right? Beforehand. I need to leave my stuff, get there first before everyone else. I can like wash up really quick, like a bird bath kind of thing, so nobody notices me. And at the end of the night, I need to take my stuff and figure out where to go. And so some nights I'm like, all right, I'm gonna sleep on this bench, or I'm gonna sleep, on the subway, which is probably the worst place to sleep at, by the way, for a host of reasons. Or I've slept in the subway, like just the actual not the subway car, but just like in the station before, in the steps. Like you're always, and the thing is, like, the thing I remember most about that actually is just like walking around with my 2 bags, the same 2 bags, and just dragging them around somewhere and just being tired, but not knowing where to go to sleep. And like, you don't ever want to sleep.
Were you scared at any point of, there's that, when I think of homeless people, I think, how must the first few days be? When you're like, I'm at the end of my tether, I don't have any money. Like you said, that's how easy it happens. It's like, I have a great opportunity in a city, I don't have a place to stay. And then the next thing you know, you're like, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. I feel like I've been in positions where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids. I have 3 kids. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to feed them tonight, because I was so poor right after our divorce. And I figured it out. And I don't have that sense of like trusting God, which we'll get into in just a second. I was just like, I got to trust me. I got to figure it out. So did you feel a sense of fear of like, I'm in the city, I don't super know. I don't know where I'm going to sleep. I know that what I'm doing is worth it long term. What was that like emotionally?
Yeah. So there was an initial fear, in a sense that like that first night, I think, is actually when like that real fear sets in. Like, I don't know where I'm gonna stay at. So you're texting your friends like, well, I told you I met some of those interns, and they're all like, I know a lot of them like, hey, I'm living with 4 or 5 people. I'm living back with my granny, or I got a kid on the way. Like, so you're just like, once you get through that whole list, and then it's like the cousin list, where I actually knew I had a lot of cousins there. I still don't know how many cousins I actually have in New York to this day. And so at that point in time, the only cousins I knew, they were already full. Another thing is too, like with my family in particular, once I was out, like literally, like I had another cousin I stayed with also at that time. Her name was Kendra, during the summer. And so she, like the moment I left as well, they had another cousin coming and staying in their small apartment. It was her and her husband with a new cousin staying there. And so there's people like constantly like replacing each other. So it wasn't even like I could just like go back and like beg to my family. It was like literally, hey, we got people coming in, man, and they got money.
There's literally no space.
Yeah, there's
not even
like
a
no
matter
space.
of want to. There's just nowhere to put you.
Yeah, and so they were just, and so that first night, it's that initial shock of where am I gonna go, and like, and it's partially shock, then partial like, the best I can describe it is, even this is gonna sound awful. I'm gonna say this now, but you don't have a purpose like out there for a minute. Like the purpose is like, I'm just existing right now. My real purpose doesn't start when my job starts again, right? And so you're just like, where do I go eat? Businesses are closed. Hotels aren't going to take me. So I remember sometimes I would just like sit in the lobby of the YMCA, because like the YMCAs in New York are actually excellent. And so a lot of people actually, and I tried to get on the list, I tried to get it, but they wouldn't. So the YMCA was like, I think we don't have that in Atlanta, but that actually is a really good thing to have for like affordable housing, because a lot of times they had rooms that you could rent for like $500-$600 a month, because you had to prove your income. So I had a proof of verification, income statement. I had my bank accounts, I had my bank receipts, I had all of that. I was ready. And I would get there and be like, hey, we got too many people tonight. We're not going to kick you out, but you guys sit in the lobby. Don't bother nobody. Don't
That's
disturb
great
me.
they let you stay in the lobby at least.
Yeah, because the lobby of them was like, it's basically like, for the ones I was trying to stay at too, were like, what's like a discount hotel chain? Not awful, but like, it's not the best.
Yeah, like La Quinta or
Yeah,
Motel
something
6
like La
or
Quinta.
something like Red Roof Inn.
Yeah, something like that. Like, it's not the best, but the people there are really nice. And so I would just do that. And then eventually, like, I remember for some reason, one of the guys I interned with, his name is Max, and he's like one of the coolest dudes to this day. I was just like, and I still wasn't making enough money to pay what they were paying. I think they were paying like $1,700 each for a spot in Brooklyn. And he was like, I'd whisper something to, I don't know, I didn't whisper. I was just saying something offhand. We were like working back at Spike's office, and it's still the fall. It was like September-ish, October maybe. I don't remember, September, October. And he was just like, I was like, man, I just got to get ready to go, and I was telling him, he's like, something I said, and he was like, where are you staying? I was like, I really don't have a place to stay at right now. And then he was like, so where you go? I was like, I really don't want to stay in the shelter, because the shelter is kind of like the county jail. Like, you just don't want to be there. It's not really what you think it is.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times I'll try to go to a church. And he was like, nah, man, I don't want you to stay at the shelter. Just stay at my place. I'll get you a key and everything, man. And just like,
holy cow.
Yeah. And so then it got time, and I stayed there for like a couple of weeks, and he did really good. And he's like, hey man, if you're gonna stay any longer, you got to pay rent. And I was like, you know what? I appreciate you, man. I just don't have the money to pay like $1,700 a month. I just don't have that kind of cash right now.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Well, it wasn't just a lot of money, even though we both were making the same amount, $500 a week. The problem was like the little debts that I did have, like student loans, I had a medical bill, cell phone bill, all of that stuff was accruing. So every time I would get a check, basically like I was spending it right as I got it. So I was like actually negative for most of that time in New York. Like my bank account was almost negative. I would always have to cash my check. And so I just did not have money despite having money coming in. So I was like actually like working poor for the majority of that time. And so then there was another dude I worked with. He was like, hey man, his name is Barrington. He's like, he had a little bit more saved up. He was like, hey man, I stay over here in Chelsea. I'm renting a spot with these. They had a nice spot, but they were renting with a bunch of people. And so he's like, listen, man, you can stay here for a couple of weeks until you figure out something. And so I think on the next to last day I was supposed to leave, a guy I knew back from Atlanta when I was working on my first documentary, Atlanta Way, he was like, hey man, such and such baby dad is up in New Jersey. Hit him up, see if you could stay there. And I remember before I even went to New York, I was like, man, I would love to stay in Jersey City. I don't know why. I saw a movie and I thought Jersey City was the coolest thing ever.
I like Jersey City.
Yeah. And so when I went up, they do. And so I remember I went up there, I saw the guy, I went up to the place, I saw the landlady. I knew I should have thought about something. And she was like, and luckily I had $500 from that check, because she was like, the rent's gonna be $500 a month. I had it then. I was like, I'll be back tomorrow.
Wow.
And so the same day I was supposed to leave that guy at Barrington's house. He was good to me. The same was Max. The same was my cousins. I just moved in. All I had was 2 bags anyway, and I moved in to the spot in New Jersey. I saw the place. It looked kind of old and crinkly, like a Victorian kind of house, like nothing crazy.
Yeah.
But I saw when I came in, they had a living room that was like, it was a Victorian house. So like the living room in that space, and it was like multi-level. So like, weird enough, there was a second floor and the main floor and the basement. But the second and main floor had the exact same size living room. And then they both had 3 bedrooms. So you could be really raking money in that kind of spot. And so we were on the second level, me and the guy I knew from a friend. And so he was like, you moved here? He's like, man, I would have told you not to do this, man. This wasn't the place to be. I was like, listen, man, I just needed something.
You got to have a place to hang your hat.
I didn't have a choice. Yeah. And so at that point, that had ended. And then Spike had another job. And the guy I was working with at the time, I was like, I had got paid. I already had that $500 from the previous week. And then the next week, that Friday, I was getting another $500. So it timed out where I had got 2 checks at the same time. So I paid the landlady deposit, the $500 straight up. I was like, okay, boom, here's the $500 straight up. She's like, there's also another $500 security fee. I was like, shit. So I basically had no money again, but I had a place to stay, which was cool. I had my 2 bags, that was whatever. Then there was this Spike on that Red Hook, someone we were telling you about. They were getting rid of all the sets. Usually like they get rid of that at the end of the movie anyway, but because it was independent and all of that, they just had stuff left over. One of which was a mattress and a box spring.
Just giving it away?
No. But Spike's assistant at the time, his other assistant was like, hey, Spike will give you this if you pay him $300 for this this mattress and a box spring. And so I waited a week till I got my next check, bought the mattress, had to rent the U-Haul. I spent all my money in getting gas and renting the U-Haul, getting the mattress, taking it to New Jersey, and coming. And then I had to go to IKEA with a little money, bought a little like lamps and light bulbs and stuff. I showed up late to work, and I had never been late before. Like I told you, I was But it was like, I had to tell the guys, like, listen, man, this is all I had. I'm sorry. Please don't fire me. Because at that point, in movies, people don't know this. You get fired easily. Movies have like one of the highest turnover rates. It's like McDonald's level. So I did that, got my space. And then at that point, I'm just like rocking and rolling. I'm in a place that's not great, New Jersey. But, you know, it's got some rodents in the house. I'm going to say it like that. I've had some rodents crawl on me at night when I was in there. I remember one night in particular, one of the mattresses, like they kind of got into the mattress while I was sleeping and I could feel like going through my mattress. And so like to this day now, I like have a thing about like my mattresses and beds and all of this to this day. It's something that's weird, I know. But
one time of a rat crawling across your face in your sleep, my dogs get in bed with me and they snuggle up against my face. And in my stupid like dream mind, I'm like, it's a monster.
Yeah. It feels like, because when it happens, you're not thinking like, it's just when you're in the moment, like it's all a crisis.
Yeah, you're dead asleep. You're like, what is going on?
Right. But the thing is, those things are heavier than I thought too, because I felt one of them, like, that actually did happen to me once where I felt something go across my chest. I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, oh, God. Because it was so, but
they're huge there though.
Yeah. They were like, it was much bigger than I thought. And then I remember one night I got fed up. So this is like late October, November-ish, maybe even December. Funny story. It had to be after October because I know this, because I had bought a pair of boots. I wouldn't have much money. I bought it from like this discount store and it snowed on Halloween. I was working with Spike and I remember this. I had to take the train so in New York, they have a bunch of trains, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Philadelphia. They all have a bunch of trains that kind of connect to each other, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone calls the main train, just like the MTA, they just call it the train. So I took the train, bought these cheap shoes in Brooklyn around Spike's office. No, it was in Jersey. This had to be no more than like a week. On a Monday, I bought the shoes, and on Friday, the shoes had come off my foot because it was just like they were gone. And so I was walking, it started snowing. It was like snowing heavy, like really, really heavy for some reason on Halloween. And the shoes I bought, I thought these were going to be good winter shoes. They were cheap, but I was like, it's fine. I kid you not. When I got off the main MTA train and got on the New Jersey Transit train or the PATH train, and I started getting home, I was like, okay, my shoes feel a little weird, whatever. I got off at my station. I started walking, and then like I see all the slush, and I kid you not, my entire bottom of my shoe just like pulled off. And so I was like, shit, I was worried about getting frostbite. And I had to take the long route home because that was the only route I knew at that point to where I stayed at. And so I'm taking the long route home. The bottom of one shoe comes off and the other one, it slips. And then also it starts to split as well. So like water is coming through and I have on regular socks. I don't have on like the special socks or anything. So the whole time I'm walking home, it's snowing. It's probably like 6 or 7 inches of snow on Halloween. And I was like, man, I hope I don't get frostbite. I hope I don't die here. I hope I don't lose my feet. I'm just going full, you go into that mode. And so
survival. Yeah,
but like that's my whole time in New York. It's a lot of these like really, really great moments. But if you actually look back, I have photos. I took a journal at that point in time. It's like it was an awful time. And so
it's one of those things where you're like, I don't know if this ever occurred to you in those moments. I've had moments where I was like sleeping in my car and I'm like, I'm gonna be able to tell my grandkids about this when my grandparents are gone. I mean, I guess I could pray to him. I don't know. We'll get into religion in a second. But I was thinking like, I'm going to tell my kids about this one day or my grandkids about this one day and how like it was a defining moment in my life. I mean, it's like The Pursuit of Happiness or like any of those movies where you see these things happening and you're like, I don't know. The Pursuit of Happiness is actually terrifying to me. The idea of being homeless with a kid.
Yeah.
Terrifying. So on the one hand, like, it sucks no matter what. But at least you didn't have a kid with you.
Nah, that we can get into that too, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But it kind of ties into what you said about your relationship with God, because I'm one of those people. I've always had a relationship with God, but I think that I don't know who your listeners are, so this may be offensive. I think that for a lot of people, okay. So I think I like that. So I was going to say for a lot of people in particular, I think that the relationship you have with God as a child or as a young person, a lot of times is what your parents' relationship is. And you're just brought into that. Right. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really until I went to New York on my own. Now, granted, I had always been believing God. I had said some wild stuff. I've done some wild stuff, but I've always believed in God in like a Christian sense because that's how I was raised. Even though my mother's Christian, my father's Muslim, I was never raised with Islam. But so religion is something that's always a part of my life. And so it wasn't until I was in New York and really on my own that a lot of things, emotionally, a lot of things, like physically, a lot of things that it's only me and God, to the point where I can say like, I believe in God now because of my own personal experience. And it has nothing to do with anyone. There's no I didn't get this car gifted to me. Then I went to college. I went to, whatever. And now, like that extension of my family is like, nah, none of that is there. It is really about me and my relationship. And I think that for me, I can stand firm in saying like that was like the actual, I can say it's the basis of my foundation in God versus like what my parents brought into me. And so when you were saying that earlier, how do you believe in God? That was one of the biggest things. I had a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety in New York that kind of carried over. And so the only thing that I could actually do each and every day was pray. And I would do this thing where, the thing is my dad's Muslim, so I had to bring that up because I would pray 5 times a day, but not like in the Islamic sense, but like all the prayers would be like, you know what? I got some time after lunch. I got like 10 minutes. I'm just going to, and my prayer wasn't like, dear Lord, thank you for this food. Da, da, da. Like that. Yeah, that was a part of it. It was more like, it was like reflection. Like, you know what? Thank you for this. And, I'm a little bit nervous about that. But I'm thanking you for each and everything. And I would end every single day in New York, every single day until I left. I would do this thing where I'm always taking the train home or walking somewhere. And I would just like think on 5 things that I'm thankful for God for. I was like, one day I was like, in the case that, God, thank you. I didn't get frostbite. Right. Yeah. Thank you. I don't have shoes tomorrow, but Lord, I have a pair of tennis shoes that maybe I can put on that I wore before. They don't smell great, but at least I have something on my feet. And so I started to count my blessings very differently. And it's actually, I think, my first time publicly saying that to anybody. So I'm actually glad I said that. But
that's beautiful, man. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. And so that's legitimately how my relationship developed. And so, yeah. So I know we want to get into it now. So let's get into it.
Well, so, I always ask people, the reason I started the podcast is because anytime I would talk to people about religion, which I do quite often as a preacher's kid, a recovering evangelical Christian, is, are you religious or spiritual? Because, most of the time now people say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And we got plenty of content on that. But from your perspective, how would you define yourself if you had to?
You know what? I'm gonna be honest with you. I would say it depends on the day. Like this is gonna sound weird, but the religiousness to me is like, religiousness is about the process, the procedures and the rules and the preparation and like the routine of like an organized space. Right. So I'm not necessarily religious in that sense. Like I said, I still pray 5 times a day, not in the Muslim sense, just because that's just a thing I've learned and I've adapted to. But that's probably the closest I have to it. And I read the Bible every morning, like a verse of the day and every night. Right. So that's just something I learned from like the religion of my parents.
Like a part of a devotional kind of?
Yeah, and that's something I learned from my parents growing up. That's like the closest I have to like an organized, structured set of religion in my life. I want to say I'm more spiritual, but even then, I don't even know if I'm like super spiritual in that regard. To be honest, like for the most of my time, I've been relatively agnostic. And I think some people, agnostic is not atheism. So I just want people to understand that as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was just about this notion of, because where I'm at, like it's like that song, like No Church in a While. Like I understand that fully now, and like being on my own. But it was like, I wouldn't even say it's religious or spiritual. I would say most of the time it's agnostic, because at this point it's just me and my relationship with God, right? And so there's no structure to it. It's like it's a part of me. And so I wouldn't even say it's like spiritual as much as like I'm not praying to the ancestors. I'm not like reflecting on like how my spirit feels, or I'm not one of those people who've had spiritual warfare, like not like that. Like some people say they have spiritual warfare things. I really didn't have that. So I would just say it's somebody who's closer to agnostic, but it's more about like centered on like the spirit of God and like the truth of like what God means to my life, which is somebody who's like a guider, a teacher, a provider, and like a helping hand. So
you'd say that correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying that you are okay with the idea of there being a monotheistic God.
Right.
But for you, a lot of it is about the practice and less about like the rules and structure of religion, or even like the kind of nebulousness of spirituality. It's more about I find comfort in almost in the way of like a mantra. You have the comfort of like, I know that I'm going to look at the Bible every day. I know I'm going to glean something from that. It guides and directs my footsteps throughout the day. And then when I lay my head down at night, I know that somebody is watching over me. I mean, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth.
Everything about that is true. The watching over me part was interesting because I'm gonna be honest with you. Like there was a couple of times I'm thinking about it now, as you say, just sleeping on the subway, where I'm like, you know what? to this day, I actually have a problem with sleeping because of that. I'm like, I don't know if somebody's going to kill me in my sleep.
God.
And so there's a certain level of anxiety that comes from that. And I was just like, so this is like a darker space right now. But like sometimes your prayer is like, you know what, God, just please don't let me die, or please don't let nobody take me. Please don't let nobody hurt me. And if it does, give me the opportunity to defend myself. And I've had a lot of those prayers with like, just don't let me die here kind of thing. Wow. And so, because sometimes when you're faced with inevitable, or you think you're faced with inevitable, or you're faced with something that's a really darker space, you're just like, I don't know what to do. And so you just don't know how it's going to go. There's a couple times, not just in New York, but Atlanta, other places where I legitimately did not know how something was going to turn out. You're just like, you know what, God, all I could do is throw up this, like, not even helmet, just like, please hear me out. I don't know if it's going to turn out well. And so like some people have that comfort and like lovingness. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I'm just going to say, thank you, Lord, for what you've done for me already. And if you don't continue this, I want to say I'm thankful. And so I know I've said that prayer because I remember saying that prayer a few times in my life where it's just like, you know what, this may be it, but like, thank you. So
yeah, I super appreciate how you're getting kind of choked up listening to you talk about that. Well, it made me think of this story. I haven't actually told anybody this, but when Corona was first starting to get into full swing, my kids are up in upstate New York, near Canada. And my oldest son started having symptoms that were sort of, Corona-y, you know? And I haven't prayed in years. I really took kind of a hard left out of Christianity and delved into Buddhism for a while. And we get into my journey. This is more about you this time, but you know, we talked about it at length on different episodes and stuff. But the idea here is that like I don't pray. I meditate. You know, I think thoughts and project thoughts out into the universe, and hopefully something pings back. You know what I mean? Like HTTP or whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, in this case, I was like, that's one of those moments where you're like sleeping on the subway, or you're in a foxhole in a war, or I mean, you're getting pulled over by a cop in the United States. You know what I mean? And you're like, there's nothing that I can do as a human being other than just that supplication, right? It's like, God, if you're real, and holy shit, I hope you are. I really need you to help me in this case. And I had that with my son, you know, and it ended up he was okay, just had strep throat. But I was like, God, please be there. If there's any sort of resemblance of anything like a God, even if it's a committee or a board of directors made up of like Zeus and a bunch of other things, please help, you know, because I'm this weak, frail human, and ultimately we all kind of are. And I really appreciate you sharing that story, King. That's very powerful. I mean, sometimes for people, that's all they have. It's just that hope.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I want to stop. I don't want to laugh at God because like that's my fault. I want to tell you a quicker example too. Like one thing about New York too that actually changed my whole perspective is New Yorkers can be really weird and over dramatic about like basically everything. New Yorkers like the most dramatic people you will ever meet in your life about 100%. Everything. But I remember this too, because I remember this because I had been in New York, and I remember this clearly because I remember the days I was working at Spike's office. This is only my 4th day there working at the office. I remember saying this to my boy because he never, to this day, every time I see him or talk to him, he always brings this up. But it was this thing where Spike's office is in like downtown Brooklyn, this place called Fort Greene. So like, if you're like, Brooklyn is actually really nice. It's just like that part of Brooklyn I call like big Decatur. And so if you've been to downtown Decatur, it's like a big version of that.
Is it nearest to like Williamsburg? I know like Williamsburg and
I
think Greenpoint. Maybe
I mean, it's walkable, but like you don't really want to walk there. Like Greenpoint is much like that, and you can get there by the subway, but it's like maybe 5 or 6 stations down. But like there's like a long train, like a long ride between it.
Brooklyn's huge. I always forget. I'm like, I've been to Williamsburg. That's all there is, and like, no, there's a whole other part.
It's like the size of Chicago, really. But
it's insane.
You know, okay, here's a good way to put that. So like Greenpoint, Williamsburg from like Fort Greene is the equivalent of like walking from downtown Decatur to like Little 5 Points.
Wow.
So like you can do it, but like it's not ideal.
Yeah,
like,
it's gonna take you hours.
Yeah, like but if you rode a train ride, it'd be there in like 15, 20 minutes, right? But it's like walking is like no, like this is just not what you want to do. Dang. But yeah, so they're relatively ish close by train, but not by walking. Okay. But no, so I was 4 days there. And like I said, this was like, I had been in New York maybe a total of like a full week at this point, because I remember maybe a little bit more than a full week, but 4 days working with Spike. I'm out. I meet some dudes that I knew from college. They're out there. They got some girls out there. We're all meeting up. He's like, hey, come to this. I'm not gonna say the name of the restaurant, but it was like this place that like did Mexican food. It was like more like, I ain't gonna say hipstery, but like, you know how that kind of aesthetic is, right? So it's in that kind of hipster Mexican aesthetic. They had an outdoor place. They playing a movie out there. It's a nice weekend night. I think it's like a Friday night. Girls are out there. People out there just having a good time, and it's packed. So I get up there. We meet, and we're outdoors in the patio part where everyone's staying, and it's outdoors. And all of a sudden, I mean, not even 50 feet away from me, this dude pulls a gun out on the other dude, points it right at his head at the restaurant, and everybody hits the floor. And I was just like, at that point in time, it was weird because like I hit the ground, everyone hit the ground, and I remember there was a girl who was with us. I don't even remember her name. I just like jumped on top of her, and I was like, oh shit, is this it for me? Because I kid you not, like, because the dude, the way he pulled out the gun, it was so quick and it was so fast. I saw it, like, you know how you have a car accident? And the car accident, everything is like all of a sudden moves.
Time
like
kind of like slows down.
Yeah, it was like that. Like, because it was like everything else was moving really fast. And all of a sudden, I saw the gun, it like everything just like automatically went to full car accident mode. I couldn't stop looking. And like, I'm not that far away from him. So like, they're at the next table. And so I hit the ground.
The guy's just sitting there? I mean, I'm just trying to picture it.
They were like sitting there. They were sitting there. You know, people sometimes at a restaurant, like, I don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes people, they were loud. I knew that much. But everyone else is loud because the patio, they got the movie on, music. It's loud in general, right? And so I could see them being loud, but you can see people's mannerisms being loud, but you can't really hear what they're saying. It was like that. And then all of a sudden, I just saw it happen. I don't know why. Even from where I was sitting, I still don't know how I saw it, but I saw it as clear as day. I mean, I had like a beeline to it. He's not that far away from me. He pulls it out, puts it right in his face. I hit the ground. Everybody hits the ground. One of the dudes I'm with, the guy from college, he's just sitting at the table, like chilling. Everyone else in the whole restaurant hits the ground. Girls are screaming and everything. I jump on top of one of the girls who were next to me, and I'm just like, you know what, this may be it. Because we're so close. I'm like, maybe he hits or tries to shoot at the boy I'm with and hits me, or he like purposely shoots us because, you know, we're in the vicinity. Yeah. And if you've ever been in that situation like that, it's generally scary because it happens once that initial shock of it comes out, you're basically frozen in whatever moment that you're in. And so, and in the case of that, the way they had it fenced off, so we were all essentially like, if that guy wanted to be like a school shooter or some shit, he could have killed everybody in there because like the way they had it fenced off, there was really only one way in and out. And so like you were trapped. So everyone was trapped. And I was just like, and then at a certain point in time, I was quiet. Everyone else was quiet. And then all of a sudden, nobody said or did anything. So we all started standing up again. He didn't pull the trigger or anything. But then I look over and the guy's like sitting directly next to me at the table now. And the cops are like, they come in.
The guy with the gun was sitting at your table?
No, he was sitting right next to me, like the very next table. Because at first he was one table over. And then at that point, he's very next to me, like a foot away from me, sitting, because it's like a crowd, like sitting. God. And so it's one of those things where you're like, I still don't know how this is going to go, right? Because like somebody could easily, like, that's him, officer, then officer.
It could be a shootout. You have no idea.
And I'm just like this could be it. Like this legitimately is it. And like it's so fast you don't have time to pray. And so that at that point it was like, listen, whatever I did before, like they talk about your life flash before your eyes, and sometimes that does. That's actually happened to me one time before. But like it was just one of those moments. Like, all right, you know what? I'm still in New York. I'm having a good time. You got to be mindful of everything, but also like, listen, if God has got you in this moment. He can also take you from this moment. So don't forget that. And so, and it was weird because at that point too, like I said, I'm like homeless. I'm not homeless. I had my cousin's there. So like, I didn't even tell my cousin. I think something about it I was like, don't tell her about what happened. So the rest of the night, we're just like trying to hang out and forget about it. And then I go home, and then it was like one of the more transformative things that happened, because when we talk about your relationship with God, I was like, you know, thank you. That's why like some days I'm like, you know, God, thank you. Because if this is my last run, thank you so much. And I think sometimes everyone's prayers is different. I could say for me, there's been a few times like that in my life where I'm just like, you know what? I have a few seconds to pray, Lord, please keep me safe. And the other one is, Lord, thank you. If this is it, thank you. And so like that's, to be in that space is not a good thing mentally, I think, for people to really be in, because you really have to trust the situation, and like everything else is out of your hands. And so
there's that immediate sense of like when you're in a car accident or something, or like in that moment where prayer becomes something other than what we usually assume it is, where it's this transactional sort of, dear God, may I have this, or dear God, may you do that. It's like, it's this immediate connection. I've never taken DMT, but I hear people talk
Yeah.
about, when they take DMT, they like feel this immediate like connection to God or to something out there in the universe. I'm actually scared of it, so probably will never do.
No, please don't do drugs. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a drug person.
I'll probably never do
no.
it, but it's the idea of it is fascinating, because I think whatever chemicals are activated in your mind during a period of trauma like that, it does make you feel like, I don't even, when you look back on it, you're like, I didn't have to pray because I was communing with God in that moment.
Right. You're 100% focused. Like, you're locked in. Like, nothing else matters. It's really just you got the scenario. That's it. Like, nothing else fully matters. Also, and too, like, by the time, and I would be honest with you too, by the time I left, there were some other things that happened in New York in my experience, which got me closer to God in a way that I wasn't expecting. And so I learned more about myself, but I also learned, like, for me, if God can see me in all these different scenarios of who I am, who I really am, who I'm becoming, and what I am in this scenario, then I got to give him his praise. And so there's a certain point in time that I felt like I was trying to pray too hard, and then I was trying to do the religious thing about being solely religious, being like very structured, and like it actually backfired, right? Because I was like, you know what, that's not my relationship with God. My relationship is not that. And so it was like a good learning experience. And I have that now, even over the last 2 years, especially now in the last 6 months, especially with everything that's going on in like the world in the last 6 months. I'm having a new like relationship with God. It's like different than it was even before. And that's something I didn't know. I thought the relationship with God, like you said, was kind of transactional. You pray, pray, pray. And I'd say this all the time. Like, my relationship with God, like an ATM. Like, all right, God, I prayed the amount of times I needed to. I took out the trash. I didn't push over old ladies. Let me get something, right? And I was like, but we think about that. Like, you get credits and you go to the bank and God's supposed to give you like what you need.
God bucks. Prayer
yeah,
dollars.
Like legitimately, like it is like just prayer dollars, please. I got interest on my prayer, and it was like, nah, fam, this ain't how this works.
I know. It's so interesting too. We could talk for hours. I get on tangents so easy. I wanted to get, before we get too far away from it, you mentioned your parents, and I always ask people, if you're not comfortable talking about your childhood, sometimes it's triggering.
I would just tell you if I'm not like comfortable with something.
For some people it's triggering. I know for me, like, this podcast is my therapy session. So,
okay.
It helps me kind of deal with a lot of that stuff. Both of my parents have passed.
I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. My dad was a pastor. He died in 98. He died a long time ago. Mom passed last year, but she was always very devout. They did not approve of my methodology or my ideologies, but it shaped me, whether I like it or not, or however it's affected me, it shaped me. And I wonder, I'm always curious. I had a Hare Krishna on here one time, and so fascinating to hear he grew up in a home where I think his dad was like Greek Orthodox, his mom was Catholic, but they never really talked about it. And then I had a couple on. One was from Spain, one was from California, and he grew up, basically atheist. She grew up evangelical in Spain, and so it's always fascinating to me to hear. I mean, if you don't mind, especially with your dynamic, do you feel like you're born into this environment, right? And you sort of like have a moment where you become sentient as a child, and it becomes more than just like eating and pooping and everything else. And you're like, I have some awareness that there is my parents. And then beyond that, it's like, what do they believe? And you just absorb everything like a sponge. What was it like growing up in your home? Were you guys drugged to church? Did they talk about it?
Yeah. So here's it. All right. This is it. I'm gonna talk about me first, and I'm gonna talk about something I want to talk about the Black community as a whole, especially like in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So me first in relationship with church. So I went to church every single weekend of my life, basically, with rare exceptions. I would go. My mom was in the choir at the churches. Like the first church we went to, she was in the choir. So that means, she would come in for Bible study on Wednesday and Sunday, and then like practice on like that Thursday. So we were at church a lot, like during the week. And then there was a certain point in time where she was transitioning to another church, like a mega church at that point in time, which would have been New Birth. And so I remember that as well, going from like the church that my mom was at before was like this church in Decatur. They had like, they were growing and stuff like that, but then they moved out to Lithonia, like a lot of other churches did at the time. That they were moving out like to the suburbs, because Black people moved out to the suburbs at that point in time. And so I remember that transitionary period from like the smaller church that we were at. The church wasn't small; it was like maybe 1,000 members, maybe 1,500.
Size.
Yeah, it wasn't like huge.
Not like a home church or something. It's like 70 people.
Oh, no. But like those relationships with the kids and like some of the people, and like the parents and all the adults at the church, I will say this. They were all really, really good to the kids in the sense that like when people talk about the community and making kids feel welcomed and loved, and this is my opinion, my perspective and how I experienced it, but they made me and my brother and stuff like that feel really loved. They made everyone felt like an extra aunt or uncle, right? So you always felt like in a very loving, always watching over space. So you can never be super bad, but you could also never like go too far astray. There was always somebody to kind of like pick you up. And I like that about it.
Some accountability.
Yeah, and that was cool. And then my mom transitioned over to New Birth for she just had a different move in her spirit. And so I remember this. My mom was we were going to New Birth more and more and more in the church less and less. And I remember how those church, and I'm sorry, I have not been to church in a long time, like for real. But when they do like the altar call at the end.
With me.
Okay, no, at the end, because I didn't want to say the wrong thing. When they do the altar call and like then they do the other one for new members, right? So I remember this because my mom like grabbed me and my brother's hand. My brother was just like, I don't care about being here anyway. Like little boys. So
Is he older or younger than you?
He's younger than me. He's like 2 years younger than me.
Okay.
And so I remember my mom grabbed my hand, was like, please walk with me up here because I'm nervous. I'm like, that was the first time I ever seen my mom really show any sign of weakness or like anything. Because when you're kids, like your parents are like superheroes for the most part. But I wasn't like kids. I was probably like 12 or 13. She's like, I need you to kid. Yeah. But she was like, come with me, and she grabbed my hand. My brother sat in the aisle, and she's like, I need somebody to come with me, because it was like a big deal for her in her life to switch over church, and she became a member of New Birth. And then at New Birth, I just remember going from, and it felt like overnight, where my mom was getting like her spiritual nourishment, and then for me, my brother, we had such a disconnect with the church. We kind of rejected it because one, a lot of our friends were there, a lot of relationships, so we weren't into it. We don't want to go every morning and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so we just like were not feeling it. And I later on met a couple people at New Birth, but like this church was so much bigger. You go from like a 1,500 person church to, at that point in the late 90s, early 2000s time period, New Birth had 3 services on Sunday. I kid you not, 8 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock.
Holy cow. And
then they had like a Sunday night service, and like that was like the Super Bowl for them. So you basically and they probably ran through like 25,000 people every Sunday. And so at that point, you go from like having really tight knit relations. Yeah, it goes from like being a small elementary school to like UGA. And it was just like overnight. And it was just like my brother just kind of mentally tuned out from that. He wasn't against God. He was like, look, this is way too much.
It wasn't really about God. It was like harder to have real relationships when it's so big like that.
Yeah. And during that point in time, that was that transition too, where they were going from the church in Decatur, because that's where I'm from, to the church in Lithonia. And so like they were literally building the church, right? And so that whole transition period was like, you said, that relationship part. And most normal church, when it's small, they had like the little after thing. They had like children's church. And it was just so many people that they couldn't physically do it. And like the new member services were typically like on like a Tuesday throughout the week or something. And I'm like, unless you're like super dedicated, you got time, you ain't coming back out to Decatur to do that. Or you definitely not coming out to Lithonia to do it. So
that's tough. Lithonia is what, like 30 minutes outside of Atlanta?
Yeah, it's a trek. Like that's a real commitment out there.
30 something minutes. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so that kind of got me to something else, which was also too, I noticed this about New Birth then. And my dad didn't say nothing to me, but I'm glad he kind of didn't now. But like now, kind of what we know from like the late Eddie Long, my dad never said anything about Eddie Long or anything like that, like ever anything negative. And I want to be clear, he had some allegations of him potentially molesting young boys, actually teenage boys at the church later on that came out, right? But at that point in time, I just remember my father was not feeling the idea of us going to New Birth, and he never said why. He was just never really, because my dad didn't really go to churches. He became more active with us then when we started going there. And I didn't notice that, like now as an adult, I kind of notice it more. But like he would just ask like, hey, what did y'all do? I'm just more into it. And then my mom would try to get us involved with stuff. And my dad like really was like, nah, I don't need him to do this. I don't need to do that. He was just really more active at that point. And again, like when you're a father, sometimes something's up. You just kind of need to stick your head out there and kind of take a.
Yeah, you sense it in your spirit. Like, smells fishy. Something's off.
Right. And so, like I said, nothing ever happened like that to me and my brother, to my knowledge. I'm not going to speak fully for him, but to my knowledge, we were always literally next to each other for everything. So nothing really popped off like that for us. Like my mom tried to get us involved with a few programs, stuff like that. But what I noticed though, is this is the thing about the Black community, is that every person I knew had grew up in church for the most part. And you grew up in church because your mama, your granny, your aunt, whoever's taking it, whatever the woman in your life was, on Sundays, you just it was no excuse. You had to go. You were baptized before you were born. Then you were rebaptized when you got maybe between like 8 and 12, 13. And so everyone just kind of had, no matter what socioeconomic bracket they were in, if you were Black in Atlanta, that's just what your experience was. Like, you went to church. Like, you didn't have no options for the most part. Or if you were Muslim, most of your friends went to church, right? So, because like there's Muslims in Atlanta, and like there's a decent community, but like you don't live in a Muslim world for the most part. Like you have other friends who are like that, and so and so what I noticed was I knew this as a teenager. I was like, why does nobody's dad go to church across the board? Like, no one's dad goes to any church for the most part, and like the only people I saw in church were like old, and it was like, and it was just weird to me. I was like, okay, because where we lived at, we weren't like rich at all. Like we would now be defined as like working poor most of my life with my parents, or like up to a certain point working poor to working class. And so I just would notice that like everyone, like my cousins, like whatever man it was, like they, with the exception of like the men who are already in church, like I knew from my mom's church previously, I just didn't see men like that. And I was just like, okay, this is weird. But like, I didn't notice it at first. Right. And so when I got old enough to like stop going to church, this was probably like around middle school, high school, my mom would go and I just like stopped going with her. And I really wish I would have gone, because I realized one of the things she when she grabbed my hand like a year or two before and she asked me to go with her was, she didn't have anybody with her at the church at that point in time that she could connect with. And like sometimes you just want a physical person with you. And so my mom eventually met a couple more. She had a couple friends who went there, and eventually they started to try to go at the same time, try to meet up afterwards. And I'm just a bratty kid. I'm like, I want to go home. I don't want to sit over there.
I was the same way.
Yeah. But I didn't get there. I didn't eat. Oh, you're a preacher, son. That's even more interesting. I want to ask you that in a second. But it was the one thing I noticed, and I realized too, there was something else about church that I think that we don't talk about a lot, which is for women in particular, it's not only their safe space to communicate, it's also for them a lot of times a place where they can take their children, they can have some time to themselves and think. And I was like, I really misread that completely wrong as a kid. Listen, my mom's probably never going to hear this podcast, but I apologize for that, because I didn't realize what kind of connection that was. And sometimes the only person you can have any type of connection with is the kid. So you may want to talk to the kid about the word, but that kid is just not mentally or spiritually mature enough to even make those real conversations, right? But since the man of your life isn't going with you, you don't have a partner to talk to. And so you hopefully can make new friends there at that church you're in. Or in the case of New Birth, luckily my mom had 2 or 3 friends that she can converse with more. But it's really hard. And I didn't realize how much an emotional attachment that not just my mom, but other women had to their previous churches. And so yeah, that's what I wanted to say about all of that.
I'm just curious, like, did you ever go home and you're like, hey Dad, I heard this at church, can you interpret? Or were you like an inquisitive kid with your parents? And were there things that you were seeing or experiencing in the world or at church that like you would go to your mom for, or your dad for in particular? Mine was always my mom. I was scared of my dad.
Oh, you know what though? My dad is always the one I came and talked to about. Like, it's different. All right. So the more like mentally inquisitive things I talk to my dad about, right? Because my dad he's always been that person that you can kind of talk to about stuff. Because my dad's like, my mom and dad's personalities, they're like 2 different people. Like, they really are 2 completely. If you didn't know they were married, you wouldn't even know that they were married. They are like very, very
somehow
different
they
people.
make it work, but
yeah, it's like I'm honestly surprised.
Opposites attract, I guess.
They're not even opposites. Like, they're not even in the same like sport. Like, one is playing tennis, the other one's playing basketball. Like, they are just not the same person.
Somehow it manages to like work itself out though. I love couples like that. I'm like, I don't know why you guys are together, but somehow it makes sense even though it shouldn't.
Yeah, but that actually leads into like the best girl I've ever dated. Actually, we were like not the same, and that kind of gets into that later on. But or we can talk about that next. But for my dad, he was always the person I talked to about like really inquisitive things, like stuff that required stuff I was learning in school or something I heard in church. He was just always that person because of his personality. He's very like, some people just shoot you down immediately, or some people don't want to hear you. He's not like that. He's very open. Like, hey, so what's going on with you? Even if I say something that's just generally just young people stupid stuff, he's just like, all right, talk to me about that. And so I always kind of appreciate that because he can be quite stoic, and sometimes that's frustrating, but then also it allows you to kind of just like him to be an ear to listen to things, right? So
that's
and
awesome.
that was different. Yeah. And
Did he talk to you about Islam, or was that something he...
He did, but only because I reached out to him about that. Because I think I was
Okay.
generally like, for me also, because all of this time, my mom's switching new churches. My brother's just like, listen, I just want to play sports and music. Like, my brother's just like a kid. He's like,
I don't care, man. Just let
yeah,
me do
he's like, I
fun
don't care. He's like, I
stuff.
love God. I ain't trying to bother nobody. Just let me do my thing, right? And so
I
my
get
mom's going
that.
through something, and then my dad also was going through this transition where my dad had went to church like everyone else, but he had started also transitioning over into Islam. And he had kind of been on a spiritual tip before. Like, I would actually say my dad is probably the more spiritual one of my two parents. I think my mom is the more religious one, and we can get into that if you want to.
Okay, that's
But
interesting.
yeah, and so he was always saying something like metaphysical stuff, and he would just always say something that was a little bit more like off center. He was like, he's very much into martial arts and stuff like that. So just very much like peace, meditation, metaphysics, the spirit, and all of that. And so I was just like, one day I remember he wore like the kufi, like the thing you wear on your head, and I was my brother was just like being a dumb kid, like, what you wearing on your head, kind of thing.
What's that? It's a weird hat.
And I knew what that was because we had like in that part of Decatur, especially when you go towards the East Lake Meadows, like I told you before, and at the beginning of the conversation, I'm from that part. So there's a large Muslim community that's around there. And so you would see them sometimes, like they had their own schools, like I think it's called WD Muhammad. There's a couple other schools that's in that area. And so you would see people like that. And I knew what that was, right? I didn't know much about it. Because at that point, the only Muslim I really knew was like Malcolm X, right? And I don't know him, but like I only know from like the movie, from like the books that people tell me, like the photos during Black History Month or something. Like that's my interpretation of a Muslim, is either the people who live over near East Lake or Malcolm X, right? So, and like, or like the people who sell bean pies on the street. Like I don't have a, and so I was like, okay. And so then he was like, he sent me a little book, and it was like basically like an introductory to Islam kind of book. And at first I was like, I don't know. I thought like, this is weird. This is scary. Or, you know, when you're a kid too, when you're Christian, this is something unfortunate. Everything that's not Christian is automatically like the devil or pagan or like mysterious. And I was like, I don't want to touch this. And then I was like, my dad's
It's
not
Satan.
evil. Yeah, I was like, my dad's not evil. My dad's not like trying to do nothing. He just wants to eat like a vegetarian and like chill out and watch Bruce Lee movies. Like, so let me see what this
sounds
about.
like a pretty good life to me.
Yeah, like he's not trying to bother nobody. He's actually a really chill dude. He's like almost too chill. Like if Snoop didn't smoke weed, that would. My dad's like basically like Snoop without the weed. He's like very chill about stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he is. Like if you talk to him now, you can talk to him about anything. He's just
I love people like that, by the way.
Yeah, he's like hella chill. Like he is. He really is. And so that's kind of like my brother. My brother is also kind of like that too. Like, listen, man, like let's just hang out. It's all good, man.
So did your brother, like, you guys are both adults now. I mean, and you've chosen your own sort of religious or spiritual paths. Has your brother sort of kind of kept up with that whole, like, I'm just going to live my life. God's cool. We're cool. It doesn't have to be talked about. Does he maintain that in his adulthood?
I have to ask him. From what I've seen, I would say probably so.
Yeah, you don't have to rat him out. I'm just curious.
No, like, it's interesting.
Do you guys talk about spirituality or religion at all between you?
No. I think we both believe in God, but I had to talk to. I don't think we talked about this in our adult years. It was just more like, I don't know. It just never really came. We talked about everything else but that. It was just like, I'm surprised.
Is that a topic in your home that you're like, I don't want to bring that up because then it'll end up being like awkward or a fight, or it doesn't sound like it, but maybe.
Nah, you know what? It's like, it's just not an issue. Yeah. In a weird way. Like that was an issue.
Okay.
I remember one time and one time only, my mom was really mad. She argued with my dad about like Islam, but it was more because like he was spending too much time with like Islam and not her. So like, I don't think it was really about the religion itself kind of thing.
Well, it's just interesting because, you know, on the one hand, like Islams don't seem to be out there proselytizing like Christians do.
That's definitely not happening.
And in the South, Southern Christians tend to want to be like, you have to be a Christian too. So let me tell you about Jesus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how does that work with like your mom and dad? Did they have just sort of an understanding about it? Or does your mom feel like she would like to get your dad to go to church with her? Or does he feel like he can and it doesn't really like interfere with? I have a lot of questions, but you don't have to answer.
No. Okay, I'm gonna answer many of them. This is based on what I remember from my life. So my dad, he's been like, him and my mom both have like went in and out of their faith moves. My dad has went more in and out of like Islam for a decent amount of time. He told you he grew up Christian. He grew up with the Bible. I think he's more spiritual than anything else, but that's me putting words in his mouth. My mom is definitely the more religious type, but she's also went through her own journey of various phases of Christianity, different churches, to being unchurched altogether. And so,
yeah,
It's been interesting. I will say I'm closer to my mom in personality, even though we don't necessarily look alike, because she's got that real fieriness, that wokeness, and like what we consider wokeness now. Like my mom was on that when I was like young, like young. This whole notion of, and it was interesting because I think in retrospect now that she was younger. She was a younger woman then. So like, you know, the way I think sometimes parents don't understand that even though you're going through something, your kids are also watching you go through something. And it's not like a struggle. It's not even like in a negative struggle way. It's just a sense that I saw her spiritual journey. And so while she would be like, when I was real young, gung-ho about going to church, praying like this, doing like this, don't say this about Jesus, to like where she was by the time I stopped going to church, which was like, she's at a new church. She's been churching around. She's questioning things about church. She's questioning things about God and religion. And so then eventually she went to college again. That's a whole nother story. Me and my mom ended up going to college together.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah, she's
awesome.
Like, she's a character.
She sounds amazing, but
yeah,
that's so crazy. You and your mom went to school together?
Yeah, we would.
Now she's going to have to listen.
Yeah. She won't. But you know, she might, but no. So we ended up going to college. That was completely by accident. But by the time I went to college, my mom decided to go back. She went to college for a little bit in another state. She moved to Atlanta, like a lot of people did. Got caught up in Atlanta. Got married, had a husband and some kids. And you put a lot of women do. So they have to put themselves behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So while my dad goes one way, she, you know, like that's just some women did. Like it's unfortunate. If I ever get married, I don't want my woman to do that. But that's just some women had to do back then. And so by the time, I think I was already probably like in my at least second or third year at that point. So I was already in college, right? So I definitely had like the college experience mostly at Georgia State. And so my mom started going. I remember her encouraging her to go because I was like, you were, and my brother too. My brother is like, he's just like the Klay Thompson of him. He's like, man, you should go, mom. You know, he's like you should go. He's encouraged in his own kind of way. And so we just encouraged her to go to school. And so the cool thing was, me and her would go to school at the same time. We never took any class together, but I would see her in the hallway, say, hey, what's up? I would see her sometime, talk to her. And like, but she really had her own experience at Georgia State. And Georgia State was big enough, whereas like, at that point, it's like 30-some thousand students, where she had her own second life as a collegiate student there, which was cool. And so people would know me. Yeah, they would know me and then my mom, but there are some people who just knew my mom and never knew me. Right. And like, that was cool. Like she was making her own friends, making her own connections. She really had like a commuter college experience that was just for her. And I'm actually glad that she did that now, because I see some of my other some of my other friends' parents who just worked. Yeah. But for my mom, her taking that time off and going back to school actually kind of in a lot of ways rejuvenated her. It got her perspective to change again.
I'm sure. What did she major in?
She ended up religion. So like,
really?
So she actually says it was religion, African American studies. So now she wants to get her PhD. I think she's doing her PhD in religion. I think I want her to do it. Like, Lord willing, I get some
on the podcast.
You should. So I told you she's a character. But like,
I have to watch my mouth though. I kind of a body.
Listen, my mom will cuss you out. She might stab you. So like, I think you're fine.
We're on Zoom. I'm safe.
Yeah.
Ish.
No, she'll get you.
I'm scared of moms.
she'll get you. You ain't saying nothing but a word. But nah, she's really cool. So, but like her whole thing is like she gets into different aspects of religion, different aspects of, in particular, like women's role within religion, and then like the whole spiritualness, faithfulness, gospel. She's just like generally interested, and I think that's something. I don't tell her enough. I really want her to learn more about that if that's what she's comfortable with. Because
that's awesome.
So yeah, I got to see her whole evolution, and so that also in affect her and my brother's evolution, because during our most formative years, like which is like the teenage and young adult years, we weren't in church like that. We knew our dad was in like Islam religion, but he never really like put that on us. Like he never pressed us on it. He never, like you said with Christians, they try to proselytize versus like when seeing Christianity in the early days of my mom. And like the church did, like, we got to go save people, right? And I remember even then, I'm like, what are we saving them from? Who are we saving? I would just have questions like that.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And so then and I got older and I started doing more things, especially when you're a teenager, you listen to music you want to listen to, the movies, you're rebelling. You have a very different relationship at that point with your parents. And then you're definitely not trying to take on your parents' religion at that point because you got real questions. But luckily, me and my brother's experience wasn't as bad because we saw them both transitioning. So that kind of allowed us to make different questions, different trends, and like kind of like fall back a bit, right? In a way that's, I don't think a lot of people's parents are going to do that to them. and let that happen, because
I think that's very uncommon, King. I think
that is definitely uncommon.
You won the lottery with that, because it's everyone in the home is like transitioning into some sort of different form of religion and spirituality at one time. Then you all grow together. I mean, it's probably, I'm going out on a limb here. It's probably very bonding for you guys.
I think so. It's just that we never really think about or talk about. So maybe. But I will say this too.
You should do it on air with me. Let's have a family conversation. I'm just kidding.
Listen, my dad won't do it, but I know my mom and my brother probably would. But
I would love to talk to your mom. It sounds like we have a lot of similar interests.
Yeah, I think y'all would. Y'all would probably talk all day about this, actually. I would talk to her and see what she says. But yeah, so the other thing was too, in regards to my walk with religion and things like that, is unfortunately, as you become older, and particularly as like a black man, like, I'm gonna take this back. This is I'm even in my spirit telling me like to walk what I'm saying. For a lot of people, God at some point, like I said before, a lot of us seen God like an 18. I know I myself did it, but also too, the notion of prayer, God, and like what all the stuff means only came up when somebody died, right? Mm-hmm. So like before that, nothing else, like, it's almost like God just kind of existed from, like, disappeared from most people's life, and it only kind of came back when somebody died for whatever the reason. Mm-hmm. For me, that never was the case, but I noticed for everyone else I was around, particularly like when you're younger, even at school, like we're gonna pray whatever. I noticed by every time I got to a teenager, we were all off that, and so. And like I told you before, my mom was in the choir, so she was always up on music. Her and my dad had the best taste in music of anyone's parents. Like I'm willing to like fight people on this one. That's awesome. So my mom had all this gospel music. I remember she was trying to get us like gospel rap. Gospel rap in the late 90s, early 2000s was absolute trash. I ain't gonna say trash because people were really trying hard. Like they were trying hard in the art, but it was just like, it was way too much like, yeah, I love Jesus, and don't do this. Sin is whack. It was just like complete. There was no
like pre-Kirk Franklin kind of days.
Yeah, well, right when Kirk Franklin was kind of coming up. Yeah, it was like, oof, what is this?
I remember hearing Kirk Franklin on like pop radio, and I was like, what the hell is going on? He's talking about Jesus.
I did too. When I heard that, I saw it on MTV when they had I was like, what? My brain was just like, couldn't process what was happening.
It was a big deal. They've done it with Hosanna music and stuff too. I mean, at the end of the day, I think they're going to like hype anything that's going to make money. You know what I mean? But still, it's kind of cool to see in mainstream.
Yeah, the Kirk Franklin thing was interesting too, because I think that was actually one of the wedges I did have with my parents in particular for a while, because you're a teenager in music, was this notion of, I remember this in particular, I told you my parents were going through a transition as well in their spiritual realms. But I remember me just at that point in time rejecting basically all gospel music. I did like Kirk Franklin because I remember for some reason him being on MTV and the singles were good. Mm-hmm. I was like, he's cool. But everything else about this is trash. And I don't want to be a part of this. It's whack. It's lame. Like that was when I was a kid, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I was like a teenager. And so I remember for a long time trying to force myself to listen to gospel music, or like force myself to listen to positive music, because at that point I'm a teenager. I'm listening to like rap music, I'm listening to rock music. I was like big into like that new metal kind of stuff. I was like listening to like New York rappers.
I know new metal.
Yeah, I was basically listening to one of three things. I was either listening to like Southern rappers like 3 6 Mafia and Outkast. Like, well, Outkast was, I'm gonna put an asterisk, but they're in a different category. It was like really hard Southern music, like 3 6 Mafia, Lil Jon, and stuff like that. Or I was listening to like that new metal, like Linkin Park, Korn, Deftones kind of thing. I was also listening to heavy Metallica then as a kid as well. And then like I was trying to like fit in, like, let me try to listen to this Fred Hampton song. And it was like, that's just not my life. And I really was like, I don't, and I tell this to all my friends now. And I really wish I would have had the words differently then, especially with my mom, because I know it kind of hurt her feelings, which was, I rejected gospel music because gospel music, and I tell this people all the time, gospel music, even as a kid, does not speak to me, right? It's not something I don't like the music. I'm not going to put it down, but it just does not speak to me. And so.
That's fair.
Yeah. And so in a lot of ways, too, that actually kind of drove a wedge between me, because now not only am I not going to church with my mom, I'm putting on my headphones because I don't want to hear the music of my mom, right?
When you were a teenager, you're wearing headphones in church?
Oh, no. Well, I didn't get, at that point, we weren't even going to church, but like you ride in the car, so they got in the car. Yeah.
I got you.
So I should have specified. That was my fault.
No, that's all right. I'm very like, I'm picturing, I'm a very like visual person, so I'm picturing everything you're saying, and I'm like,
okay.
In church, and he's wearing his headphones.
Well, no, that was the other thing about church too. When church music would come, I remember I used to do this. I would literally walk out like during when the bands would do praise and worship, because I was like, I don't want to hear this. I would just walk around the church. Yeah, my brother would just be like, man, he going to sleep on the back. He just like, man, listen, I'm here. I ain't gonna mess with him. I ain't rocking the boat too much. I'm going to sleep. right? But like, I'm just like, I'm going to walk around. I'm going to go look at other stuff in the church. I'm going to talk to other people. I'm going to get involved with like children's church. I'm going to get involved with like the food ministry. I was doing whatever it takes to not be in there during that.
Yeah.
But I think also reflects how gospel is the good news, right? And so that good news and the performativeness of it was not something that never spoke to me, because in reality, I think this is going to sound strange, because I never saw as a kid my father accept that. And his acceptance, it wasn't that he didn't say yay or nay. He wasn't there, and I didn't see other men say that it was cool. So that internally let me know, like, this is not something I want to be in. And unfortunately, this is something also I want to say is messed up, because when the only time you do see men in the church at that point in the 90s and the 2000s was either like older men, like these guys are older than my dad, like, so I don't have the same connection to them, or like, unfortunately, gay men. And I was never like anti-gay. It was just like, okay, this is not for me. I don't get the joy like this guy is getting, right? I just don't get the joy. So it was like, all right, I don't see myself in these two scenarios. And so my dad's not here. And normally when you're a man, especially growing up as a man, a lot of your, unfortunately, like your music, your mannerism, what do you think is cool comes from your father. And since my father wasn't there for that end of it, I wasn't there. But my father would be if we want to talk about the Bible or like going through an interpretation of it, he was there for that part. So for me, the music never spoke to me, and then I never had any men who I either looked up to or I felt I saw myself in be in church or be particularly worshiping God. So I just was like, I'm out. This ain't for me. And so all of those things, as I got older, I got music. The wild thing is, even though I'm listening to Lil Jon and Kirk Franklin and all of that foundational stuff that particularly my mom put into me about like the religiousness of it, like learning scriptures and all that actually stayed with me basically throughout everything, all the way up through New York. Right. And so that was the thing that stayed. So like, it was weird. Like, I don't remember anything else from church. I remember just like my mom always being like, you pray every night before you go to bed. You wake up and pray every day. You read your Bible every day. I remember that aspect of it more than anything else. And it's like, because that's something I saw her do. Even when she's like challenging stuff about God, she's reading the Bible, then she's reading a book on something. She's reading or listening to a tape about different aspects of the Bible or sometimes inspirational stuff. And so for me now, the actual way I kind of practice my faith is, ironically enough, like how she would do it. She would read the word. She might read a book about one particular person who wrote the Bible. And so she would always be questioning things. So now as I got older, I was like, oh, okay, I know where that faith walk comes in because I've seen it through my mom. And then the other aspect of the faith walk is like this notion of like giving thanks and reflection and praying 5 times a day. That comes from my father. More specifically, also like this notion of not being like so weirded out by other people's religions or their thoughts also comes from my father. So it's like, he's really cool about it. He doesn't he doesn't fight people back. So again, you learn from your father. So if my father's not pressing people on their thoughts, he's not fighting that. When he does have a question, he'll just reply a question with a question, or he'll just like really take time to learn. It's like, okay. As an adult, I learned that when I was like in my 30s. I'm like, okay, you know what? Now I get why I'm the way I am with my walk to religion. And I don't think enough of us take time to kind of sit back and get to that point.
There's so much. It's so deep, King. Like everything you're saying is just like, it's really resonating. There's so many things I'm like, that's a great point. Let's talk about that. That's a great point.
Just whatever you want to talk about, though. Like, I'm here for you.
I got some questions for you, but I mean, we're trucking along pretty well.
Whatever you want to do.
2 quick things I did want to say, and one is that is so incredibly powerful that we used to be millions of years ago all in tribes, right? We all come from tribes. We're all diasporic to some degree, dwell to a large degree. So in those kind of tribes, you were shaped by everybody, you of course your father, of course your mother, of course your siblings, but in those small tribes, you were shaped by everybody, probably more so the elders of those tribes than you were even your own parents. And now, because everything's sort of topsy-turvy and we live in a world where it's like everything is kind of put on your parents now, you know what I mean? Which, as a parent, let me tell you, it's a lot of pressure. They could find somebody way more qualified than me to raise children, I swear to God.
Yeah.
But, I don't know what my kids are paying attention to, but I do know that they're being shaped by experiences that they're having, and the things that stick with them are what they see me do, not what they hear me say I'm doing. And I know that because it was true of my parents. I knew that on the way to church on Sunday mornings, mom and dad were yelling at each other, and dad was swinging at us in the back seat.
Oh, no.
He wasn't that good at it because he never got me. But he was always like, stop hitting your sister. And I was like, come on, man, is that the best you got? You need
Yeah.
longer arms. Get out of here. And then we'd get to church and he'd jump out of the car and he'd be like, hey, brother, and he'd be like shaking hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff. That's what I think. Well, anyway, I mean, we could get into it, but like how you see this duplicitousness sometimes in the church, but for you, you're looking around and you're like, who are my role models, and you have one in your father. Like, he sounds like an amazing dude, but he's not in this environment. And so it's like, it's kind of like when you get your first job or when you first go to college and you're like, I'm the adult here, even though you were a teenager, like, I'm the one who has to decide which of these things are influencing to me. And you kind of made your mind up that like this, this music's cheesy, or this experience isn't exactly for me, or like, I want something different, but I think that's part of becoming an adult in a way, but also like, it's cool that you've circled back now as like a fully actualized adult, and you can see that and you're like, oh wait, those things were actually good. They were shaping me. Now I know, like, this is where my dad sort of belongs in my narrative. And that idea of legacy, they've passed on you're an incredible guy. Like, they've really passed on this legacy of like excellence and knowledge and really thinking things through and being, I don't know, I'm going to butter you up.
Oh, it's all good. Listen, you're never as good as you are. You're never as bad as you are. So I always say kind of even.
That's true. Well, if you don't mind, I got a couple things I do want to kind of get to, because
Let's go.
I'm just curious. So you are a documentary filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I knew you were. I didn't know if you still currently were in that.
Oh no, I definitely am.
I hope so.
No, I am, and I know I don't want to get off too long on this, but there's two things I want to say about that.
Yeah.
One, I am a documentary filmmaker again. I've had to get back into it, and that entire journey to get back to documentary filmmaking has been a process in itself. And I will say, to be honest, like, that was one of the. I have 4 regrets in my life. That is one of them, which is not finishing my documentary, because I put up for a decade a wall of self-doubt, right, and failure. And rigidity. And I want to say it was 2 things: a wall of self-doubt and a wall of rigidity. And you can sometimes get through one or the other breakthrough, but if you put both, they're always a new thing. Self-doubt was like in the sense of like, I don't have enough money, I can't do this, I can't, right? And then the other one is rigidity, the sense that like, because I can never move forward. Because I can't have this, then it can never be the way I want it to be, right? And so that's something I've just come out of over the last maybe 1 or so years. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of people, like my aunt, who I take care of now, before she had what happened to her, which is my aunt is she's a stroke survivor. And so she had a massive stroke that left her partially paralyzed and 95% nonverbal. And so one of the things she is one of my biggest supporters, but I can never hear her voice again tell me, it's okay, please do it. It's okay, please do it. Because now she can only say maybe about 20 words or so. And so the fact that I could never get that film done for her is now something that lingers on me. And it's like one of the only 4 regrets I have in my life. And the other one is I have there was a guy in my life who I basically called my uncle. And so I worked with him. He owned a catering company. He owned a hospitality staffing company. He was always in the hospitality business. So most of my life I was either employed by him, managing stuff by him, working his business for him. And in the last days of his life, I was really the last year or 2 of his life, taking him to medical visits, helping him get his cell phone fixed, like just doing little things that you would do that his kids weren't even doing with him, right? And so he was the biggest proponent of me finishing my film and getting back in the documentary film world full force. And he died this February on Valentine's Day. And so I remember a month before I told him, I was like, hey man, I got the film, I'm gonna do it. And then I just didn't have it done. And so when he died, like he perked up when I said I was going to show him something, and then I never did it. And so that is something, like when I talk about regrets, I can never change it. I can change everything else in my life. I can never change not finishing something. And how my aunt and how my play uncle were rooting for me. One of which will get a chance to see it, but the other one, Lord willing, my aunt gets a chance to see it, but my uncle, he just doesn't. And so for me, that's why I got back into documentaries. But now I'm like, I'm different now. It's 9 years since The Atlanta Way first came out. I don't have the money. I don't have, like, the footage I have was always, and that's kind of what brought up the mental blocks was, that footage in particular was never complete. And that's, so it was kind of frustrating hearing friends, like, just put out what you have. And it was like, you have one interview with somebody, one interview with somebody else, but you needed to interview 20 people. You'd never had the money or the footage to buy for the rest of the stuff. So it was always, even when I raised a Kickstarter, I just never had enough money to complete everything. I probably needed $50,000 and not the 15. And so it was just like frustrating. I was like, I can never get this the way I want. I was like, all right, you know what? If I don't do nothing else in my life, I'm going to finish this film, because there's at least 2 people, not including my family, everyone else who supported me, who really, really wanted to see this. So I'm back in the game on that one. And even before I got my feet wet working another documentary that came out on PBS March 24th. It's called Eastlake Meadows, a Public Housing Story. I'm an associate producer on that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that came out, and even when I saw it, I was like, okay, that was cool, man. But it was just like, it wasn't like mine. So I was like, I need to get back to my project, because this meant something to people. That's a little different. So that's how I got back into the documentary filmmaking side of it. So I haven't left fully. I had to come back to it, because I definitely stepped away from years, like a bunch of years of false starts. So.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a parallel there. My co-host is he's an evangelical Christian. He's a full-time missionary. He goes around the world and helps people start churches. And he always says, like, sometimes for me and a lot of other people, you have to walk away from it to be able to come back to it. I think that's true of a lot of things: religion, your home, your early passion projects. I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker myself.
You still can.
I still could. I tell a lot of people, I don't tell a lot of people that, because there is that element of like, well, what have you done? It's like, nothing.
It doesn't matter.
You know what I mean? But this podcast is something for me that was years in the works. I've been wanting to do this or write a book for about 10 years. So I could definitely relate to that. And I think a lot of people listening could probably relate to the idea of like, I started this thing. I never even finished college, King. I'm about a semester shy. And that's stupid. One semester.
No, you can still do it. And maybe your life doesn't require you to like finish college. Sometimes you got to think about that too.
That's true. And I've kind of made peace with it, but I think a lot of people, they have regrets like that. My dad died before I got to tell him I was successful, or your uncle died before you got to finish your film. I think that's a powerful story, because you're also sitting here saying on the other side of that, yes, I have regrets, but that's not preventing me. That's actually motivating me to finish these things because they're important.
Yeah. And so it's just different. I understand I'm going into a different world now, like with the documentary film world and like what the world is in general. But I'm like, you know what? If I believe God is real, and I believe God is real through the things that I do, I'm going to manifest this, and I'm going to show everybody that it's possible. So that's the only way I can kind of like, I can show you better than I can tell you, kind of thing.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's very true. I was going to ask you, is taking an event like literally anything, like, well, your documentary is about gentrification. So you take an event like that is so important, but so infinitely complex and so multi-layered and faceted. How do you take something like that ultimately you're a storyteller, and how do you tell that story in a way? I mean, you just said it, like, it's a different time. People are making movies with cell phones now, like, how do you take this giant issue of gentrification and what's happened in like Eastlake Meadows and all that, and how do you tell that story? How do you get that information to people in a way that they'll A, pay attention, and B, walk away feeling like they really are educated and they want to take some action? What is that like for you? What is that process like for you?
Before, I would always be like the type of person I would go to everywhere promoting my film, like walking around, going to clubs, bars, whatever, talking about it. But now my thing is, all right, we're going to be in COVID for a while. So my thing is, I got to go. And I already knew this before. It was something I learned from when I first started doing this stuff with Spike. When I first at the beginning of the podcast, told you that I saw how when my first documentary, like the longer short film I put out, and how that did well on YouTube at that time, and then it got taken down and people make copies of it. And also when I was working with Spike's thing, how people could be essentially an evangelist for my at that point my character. So I was like, all right, taking those two things I learned from the past, I'm gonna put in this new thing, which is I'm gonna make a documentary that's short and accessible, and as an overall product, but I'm gonna cut it up into smaller pieces. And the goal, hopefully, is that people, if they like what they see, they spread it through their own communities and their own networks. Because I understand, like, there's no box office right now. This project, I don't have any inroads with a Netflix or a Hulu or something like that, but I do want people to learn about the history and like of gentrification in Atlanta. The best thing I could do right now is make something that's as digestible as possible that can be shared by as many people as possible. So my thing is, my goal is for it to be out in like the fall, like around September, Labor Day weekend. My thing is, I want something that could be continually played September 2021, September 2022. Like, that's constantly in rotation and people always discovering. Because at this point, for me as a filmmaker, I'm pretty aware I can probably do something, and I know my journey is not going to look like everyone else's. But more importantly, I know the thing I'm producing means a lot to Atlanta, because the film I want to do is not the East Lake Meadows. It's not the other ones I'm working on. There's a specific story that people gravitated towards from my perspective, and I need to make sure people are getting that. And don't be worried about what the first day looks like. Don't be worried about what the second day looks like. Worried about, am I delivering on a story that I think people are going to want to be teaching their classes 10 years from now? And I've seen it with the Atlanta Way stuff I already had. I was like, you know what? Double down on what's worked before, which is people want to see the everyday residents. People want to see like what Atlanta used to look like. They want to get answers to questions about where they fit in on the gentrification spectrum. Answer the stuff that's needed. It may not look good. It may not even make chronological or logical sense, but deliver on what people are asking for. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it this time around.
That's an interesting point, and I'm glad you said that. So part two, I guess, of that question would be, you hear statistics about everything all the time, you know, all the time. I mean, and then it's like Colin and I, my co-host, talk about it a lot. It's like there's data, right? And then there's the interpretation of data. Most of us operate off of our sort of like digestion of that interpretation of data. But now we live in a time where we can actually, I can go on pewresearch.com and I can see where they got their data from. And I could be like, that number actually doesn't, I'm not that smart, but let's pretend for a second like I am. I could go through and I could be like, that they're getting those numbers from this or that. Like with COVID, there's this whole argument that like a guy, you know, he was diagnosed and he fell off his motorcycle and he died from that they registered as a COVID death, right? So, and countless examples of things like that, how things are hyper-diagnosed, like autism spectrum and all these other things. It's an interpretation of data. What actually resonates with human beings is not numbers, unless you're some kind of massive nerd, you know? Yeah. And so that's the stories. And that was watching the clip that, and I'll share it. If it's okay with you, I'll share it on our Facebook.
You can share whatever you want.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. I appreciate it. I really, you know, wish people would take a second and look at it. I think Atlanta is such a unique, and I tell people this all the time from other parts of the country. I'm like, Atlanta is its own thing. No matter where else you go in the world, and I've been around, I've been real lucky in that regard, and I'm thankful for that. There's nowhere else like Atlanta, and we have our own set of situations, our own set of you know, challenges, our own set of hopes. Really, I think in a lot of ways. So for you look at the stories, the statistics in gentrification they ain't great, man. They're not great in Atlanta. Like there are places in Atlanta that have been literally bulldozed by gentrification, like the West End right now is getting, you know what I mean? So how do you kind of choose like which story within what community am I going to tell? You know, how do you sort of approach that?
All right, so I think about it in two ways. There's the main story of the Atlanta Way, and then what you're talking about, the West End. These are like small history stories, right? So the way I'm approaching Atlanta Way is like the small history stories, they're informed by the bigger product, but they're also kind of separate. And so the way I talk about the Atlanta Way, that I'm going back to what I initially wanted to do. I wanted to tell the story of gentrification in Atlanta. And I think that for gentrification, it's very, very much either one or two approaches. It's very top down, academic-y or real estate-y, where like this X, Y, and Z. Look, it's like about... Or it's very, very personal. There's like really no in between. It's small, it's personal. You feel a certain way. I'm like, these are both part of it, and they should be a part of the story when they need be. But really, I'm talking about, okay, what is gentrification in Atlanta? What does that actually mean? Gentrification in Atlanta is, and the reason I even called it the Atlanta Way, it's the story of like the haves and the have-nots, but it's the haves and the have-nots with nuance, in the sense that I called it the Atlanta Way because it's the Atlanta way of doing things, which is the phrase that dates. Depends on who you talk to, but it for a lot of people, for a lot of people in the academy, it dates around the time of the 1906 race riot, when people like Alonzo Herndon and the black elites worked with a lot of the white business community after the 1906 race riot, because it was 4 days long. It fundamentally changed the literal way people live and where they live at in Atlanta, right? It pushed black people further south into what we now know as South Atlanta, Turner Field, all those places, right? Pushed them. It destroyed Decatur Street, which is why Auburn Avenue even existed as a result, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was so bad that the New York Times actually picked that up. There's actual New York Times articles from 1906 and other Parisian papers that talked about Atlanta's race riot, like, and how bad it changed the city. So what happened was you had this two dynamics. So you have the haves and the have-nots, but there's even like a caveat to that, in the sense that this haves and have-nots and dynamics in Atlanta is a microcosm of America. What essentially you have like white and black, but more specifically like rich and poor. In the case of Atlanta, rich white Atlantans, rich black Atlantans, and they're dictating, right? So even though when they come together in 1906 and then later on in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, they're dictating what's going to happen in Atlanta for Atlanta's public-facing campaign, in the sense that why Atlanta's grown so much, right? So why Atlanta's grown so much, why me and you are here, we're both byproducts of people who moved, either yourself, you moved to Atlanta at some point, and then my parents moved to Atlanta from other places. But that Atlanta way of doing things, that coalition, has, for the longest period of time, really been how we govern things. But the rules don't necessarily fully apply, because what's even done in that kind of bartering between the two elites doesn't always translate back to the greater black community, in the sense that here's a good example. It's not the 1906 race riot, which is when Atlanta got black police officers, they talked to like the black elites at that point in time on what that was going to look like. And then they explained to them, like, you're going to get black police officers, but those black police officers can't arrest white people. They can only arrest black people. And, and so like, there's that kind of caveat to it, right?
This is
so
in
where
1906 when this happened?
This is the result of things after 1906.
Okay,
and so 1906 it's something we don't talk about often. It's kind of amazing, but that 1906, the Atlanta way of doing things and that structure that kind of emanates out of it is the reason why Atlanta has worked for as long as it has. Because when people think about Atlanta, they think about the black elites, they think about black people doing well, black mayors, entertainers, athletes, celebrities who are black, who are here in Atlanta. But a lot of that comes from that coalition. And then over time, that coalition has changed over the years and things like that. And then again, it changes in like I said, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's slowly changing again. The civil rights movement, MLK, really, really changed that, because Martin Luther King's father, MLK Sr., had a lot to do with negotiations as well, right? People like him, John Wesley Dobbs, they did a lot of things like pre-civil rights era that kind of set the infrastructure for Martin Luther King to even thrive. But they had to negotiate with like the business leaders, like, hey, we need more space for this. We're going to help register you more voters, Mayor Hartsfield. And as a result, you got to give us more black demands. And so a lot of the infrastructure of what makes Martin Luther King comes from like his dad and other people at that point in time. But they were a byproduct of even the Atlanta way of doing things back in 1906. So there's layers to it, right? So I'm like, this is the story we're telling about gentrification in Atlanta. And I know for a lot of people, they're like, well, how does this resonate with gentrification? If you can go through that story, understand like, okay, then by the 1970s, how that coalition is like kind of in a fray, and how Maynard Jackson is a threat to that particular type of coalition. And he brings in a new type of black middle class. He also brings a lot of money that for the first time, he's allowing women to work in large numbers in the public sector. This is the 1970s. And if it wasn't for Maynard Jackson, I don't know where women are, LGBT people are, black people, if it wasn't for somebody like Maynard Jackson.
It wasn't
right?
that long ago. I was born in 1975.
Yeah, so this isn't that long ago. And then you see how each and every version of the Atlanta way does something. But as a process, there's a trade-off, like I said before. This is the story about how we get to gentrification, which is we have to tell the story about the haves and the have-nots, the elites and the elites. But more importantly, what happens with those concessions, right? So the concessions are, you have things like, particularly around Ivan Allen, who was like on paper, the last like white mayor of Atlanta, because some people will say that Sam Cassell, the last for real white mayor, was Jewish, so he doesn't count with like the white count of things. But Ivan Allen, this whole coalition building and things like that, where he's trying to keep white people in by giving in his demands about segregation. So there was this thing called the Peyton Wall, where people, they literally built like a concrete barrier for black people to not drive through, right? So Ivan Allen was that kind of mayor. And then there was the 1966 riot. The first year the Braves were in Atlanta, there was a race riot about a police killing. You can look it up. But it's like telling the story about how every concession by the elites at the top leads to something else on the bottom, to the point where we get public housing, we get disinvestment, we get white flight, and that leads to overall disinvestment in Atlanta. And that disinvestment is a result of these deals that have happened before. And that result is how we get to gentrification where we are now, because the Black elites could never do enough to take care of everyone. So they could only focus on other Black elite issues, for good or for bad, intentional or not. And so this is kind of how we get there. And then the other thing is too, like now I didn't know what the ending was, but I kind of know what it is in 2020, which is we were kind of getting to this pre-COVID where, because that Atlanta way of doing things was so great, it allowed for a lot of new businesses to come in the state. And Atlanta is the catalyst for Georgia's economic growth, right? And so we've seen over the last 20 or so years, Republican governors and what they've done to the state, they've built upon Atlanta's success, even though they don't live in Atlanta, right? They'll demonize Atlanta to their voters. But when it comes time to pitch businesses, they're not pitching like, no offense, they're not Waycross, Georgia or Rome, Georgia, right? They're pitching, this is Atlanta, Comcast, you come down here, you can have something in the city, you could be in Sandy Springs, yada, yada, yada. Or they're pitching the Port of Savannah, right? These are two very specific things. And so it's over time, that Atlanta way of doing things has been so successful. The state is built upon that. And then now with all the successful business, that's actually threatening the good old boy system as a whole. And so, but threatening that good old boy system as a whole has real ramifications. Like there's large pockets of Atlanta that have poverty that are vulnerable to gentrification because they've been purposely disinvested in throughout the years. And in the case of now, we're going to start seeing this in the statewide level, which is this issue of the good old boy system. Georgia has worked well for so long. They can pitch Atlanta. They can do their economic development. They can build roads and bridges and little highway cleanups is the way they're saying they're stirring economic development. But that's even about to be challenged now because we haven't had this before where primarily white conservative men are going to have to start talking to liberals, people of color, the LGBT community, and have to build coalitions with them on the statewide level. And so this Atlanta way of doing things now is going to translate into a Georgia way of doing things where you can't be overtly segregationist or racist like you before. You had to have concessions, right? And if you don't, then these things lead to a new problem that you can't get yourself out of. And so it's interesting to get to this point with the story. But it's like, you know what? I'm here now. I got to come back to it. And it's a different kind of story. It's not the story I think people want, but it tells why Atlanta gentrified the way it did, because we have a structure that in place that purposely is doing like a series of underdevelopment in one spot in order to prop up development in another spot. And eventually that check becomes due. In the last 10 years or so in Atlanta, we've seen that check come due. And so that's what the new story is about. It's a very different story from the one people seen before, but it's a more totalitarian story that can go small, it can go big, but it's about where things are.
Why do you think that people don't want to hear that story?
Because it's not convenient, because on some ends it's easy, right? So if I'm like, well, Josh, you moved into my neighborhood, so you're gentrifying it. You're a part of the problem. You're taking over. I mean, okay. So Josh is moving in, right? So I want to tell us, that's what I was saying, like those secondary stories. I think that's what a lot of people want to see. But like that, the reason why I think I didn't want to go with that one is because it's like eating a hamburger. Like you're never fully full. You get that initial hit of what you wanted, that initial first bite. But then you see it on the internet all the time. People say, I've seen that same video at least 25 different cities, San Francisco, Seoul, South Korea, whatever. These people are moving in. It's really a problem. Man, I don't know what's going to happen. The person moving in says one or two things. Well, I need a place to live at because it's affordable. Or the other person says, you should be happy that we're moving here. We're bringing new investment. And then you wonder about those videos keep circulating. They get comments. They do well for bite-sized clips, but it never gets at the issue. And more importantly, it doesn't stick with you. So that's why when you see another video, you see it, you get a little reaction, then you move on. You see it, you get a little reaction, you move on. I'm trying to give you like the buffet of like, all right, this is the entire meal. You can pick what you want out of the meal, but I'm going to first show you every single thing on the menu first.
You could even in a way, like you could do that same story that everyone else is doing, but you could say, but this is for Atlanta, so it's different, but it still is just like polishing it up in a way that's presentable, but you're not giving them the depth of content and the depth of how did we get here? Because I think that's the important part of the story, right? How did we get here? I don't think a lot of people even know. And in actuality, and I'll even say as a white person, I started calling this a reverse white flight about 10 years ago.
That's actually kind of true.
they built the highways, and then it made it even easier for people to escape the cities where they're like, it's been, the crime and everything else. I mean, unfortunately, I heard it from my grandparents growing up, and I had no way of understanding what truly was happening because I was just a child.
Yeah.
But looking back on it now, I was like, holy shit, white people are going out the suburbs for, in large part, like whether they want to admit it or not, for racist or bigoted reasons. And now they're coming back because the cities are cool, and you can find all these like mixed use places. I blame the millennials, man. Damn, I'm just kidding.
Millennials
I'm
might
just
save
kidding.
us all. So I'm
I
gonna
know,
like,
I'm totally kidding. It's just funny because I'm an older guy to like blame the millennials for everything. I think they're
it's
awesome. I
fine.
think they might actually change the world. But I was like, I moved to Decatur with my kids from up north, North Georgia, because of the schools. And some of my friends were in the schools, and so I was like, I'm going to move to this little like town of Oakhurst where I can put my kids in this great school. They can walk to school. It seemed like paradise to me. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anything about gentrification at the time. And then I did it, and I started hearing like, oh yeah, this neighborhood used to be. There's a store called Hop and Shop. And they're like, oh yeah, it used to be called the Stab and Grab. And I was like, oh, it's crazy. I'm glad I didn't live here. And I'm like clueless why this all happened. And what we're ultimately telling is the same story that you're telling, is that like systemically over time, we just shuffle people around, We're like, okay, black people, we're going to leave you with Atlanta. We're going to take off to the boroughs. Hey, now we're back. Thanks for holding on to our spot for us. You know what I mean?
That's kind of a way to look at that. Yeah. But I think that, all right, so there's a couple things you said I do want to address, and I'm not going to take long. One of which is
Fine.
The back to the city movement, as much as people want to attribute that to millennials, it's actually Gen Xers who really got that kicked off.
All right, let's not get carried away. All
no,
right,
I'm serious.
I'm just kidding. I know.
Yeah. Think about like, all right, so the back to the city movement, I don't know if people know this, really in America really starts in the late 90s, we'll say from post 96 Olympics on, not just in Atlanta, but America. So Atlanta, New York, some other places, they're slowly in the late 90s starting to come around. The best example is, if you don't believe me, is cities that are changing in real time. You can actually do this in a real time map. Look at every city that the real world has gone to between like from the start in 93 to like basically 03.
The show on MTV, The Real World?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're all located in center cities.
Sense.
And so we think about this for like, there was a good decade or so, basically from like 2 or 3 decades from like basically the late 1960s to like basically late 1990s, where every media thing you consumed about young people is weird. If you look at the media consumption too, and look at what happened with The Real World at MTV, which is everything about young people is always centered in one of two places. They're always isolated. One. So like, look at that period from basically the 1960s to the middle 1990s. It's always either in a suburban place, a small town, someplace that's isolated to itself, far away, right? Just the media you consume, or even like a college town, right? So all the movies, all the stuff you love is always like that. It wasn't really until MTV and The Real World did a really about face in the 80s and the 90s, where they're like, no, MTV, we're based in Times Square, and Times Square was like changing from rough, right? We're based in Times Square. We're in New York City.
Yeah.
Then when they started doing The Real World, they're like, The Real World's in Miami, not in Palm Springs, Florida, like Miami. We're in New York City, like for real, Lower East Side, New York City. We're in Seattle. We're in but like they were actually legitimately in cities, and people forget about this. Those are the people who are coming of age, that 10 years or so, that was the first time they had been exposed again to city life in particular. And that also indexes with this other trend of like those people getting older, who also like those Gen X at that point in time. And so you have millennials and TV. There's also a show like Friends, Living Single. Those shows in the 90s also are prioritizing not living in the suburbs, not coming over, hanging out somebody's house. We live in the city. So your media is like starting to tune young people like, hey, cities are cool. Cities are okay. And then you have this other thing that explodes in the 90s too, like rap music, which is all based in cities, like specifically actual inner cities.
Yeah.
And so that becomes like the nexus point. We don't talk about this enough. I'm writing on this now, which is the media culture and consumption is feeding into that. And then also this is just the reality of it. And everyone who's a developer tells you the same thing, is the suburbs have a limit, and the suburbs by actual design are isolationists. And so that's led to the millennials built upon that though, but it was only built upon because the Gen X became developers and things like that. And they developed in the cities. Millennials had already grown up with not quite the same experience with The Real World and stuff like that, but they built upon the media that came afterwards. Right. And so millennials are living in cities that Gen Xers have now bought or developed that is too expensive for them to live in, and it's pricing out the Gen Zs altogether. And so
Grant Park.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother, that gets into a larger thing. I think COVID is about to switch some things up for people in the way that they don't like. And I see a lot of interesting takes on the internet, I'll say it like that, about related to the housing market. But for everything I said before, we're about to get a real housing market that's not like anything we've seen before. And it's going to be a lot of people who are trying to use old methods of assertion for this new marketplace. And we're just not seeing the forest from the trees on that one.
What do you mean exactly, if you don't mind unpacking
simple.
that?
So yeah, building upon that, which is this. Like I said, we didn't think COVID 2 years out, June 2022. We just need to be honest with ourselves. Like there's hopefully a vaccine or some type of therapeutic or protocol to like reduce this, or like hopefully nothing else has popped off. But over the next 2 years, there's people writing about this all ready saying, look, millennials are going to move back to the suburbs. Look, and what they're really trying to insinuate is that cities were overpriced. Cities aren't good. Move back to peace and prosperity and safety as the suburbs. While that is somewhat true, the reality of it is there are more millennials than baby boomers. There are also more millennials now who are already in that life cycle. Like the oldest millennial is 39, right? So like maybe 40 this year. And the youngest one is like 23. So like at a certain point in time, they're just going to get older anyway. A lot of them grew up in suburbs still, but the suburbs, for some of those who are moving back, are only happening right now for those millennials who have either a family or the means to do so, right? So for most of those millennials who are still in cities or on this thing called edge cities, like Dunwoody is an edge city. It's like a city next to a major city.
Sure, that makes sense.
Millennials are mostly staying where they already are, which is urbanized environments, primarily cities and edge cities. What we're really seeing in the housing market is those who have means are buying homes, but they're buying homes either directly within the city, directly outside the city limits, or within the edge city. So what we're really seeing, and everybody who's in real estate will tell you this, is the suburbs are already urbanizing, but the next 2 years or so, they're going to have to keep urbanizing. What we're going to really, really see in the marketplace is that urban spaces are the ones that's going for the highest. But the other problem is that the suburbs that people are moving back to are not the suburbs of old. They're not like the white picket fences. They're not like the strip malls and just like isolated from everything else in the middle of the strip. They're much more connected to highways, roadways. In the case of the city of Atlanta, mass transit stops. In the case of the burbs now, they're more and more connected to things like walkways and runways and trails. They're building in an urban environment and suburban settings. And I think that people aren't forgetting that younger people want to be around other people, period. The only reason a lot of them are moving, if they can't move, they have to move further out. And we've seen this in real time. The younger people with less money are moving further out of the cores, or they're staying home with their parents or their grandparents or something, who are moving also further out of the cores. Those who have money are just moving to different pockets of these urbanized cores, and they're staying there. The people who have money, they're still buying their homes in East Cobb. They're still buying it near Dunwoody and Chamblee. Like you see all the new townhomes and all the new other things that popping up right alongside that 285 on the northeast side to northwest side. Mm-hmm. And that's because we all know the same thing is, listen, if you and your kid, you got to cash out for your kids, and you live in Atlanta, you want to cash out for your kids, you're probably not going to move all the way out to not even Alpharetta. You're not even going to move out to Gwinnett, right? Gwinnett's just too far. It's not really what you want. You're going to probably move to some place that gives you the same level of school you have as Oakhurst, but gives you the same lifestyle that kind of Decatur brings, which is urbanized, which is walking mobility, which is family friendly, which is open for new experiences with friends, something that you can easily do without a car. Mm-hmm. The suburbs of today ain't going back to, they're not going back to the isolation as before. And the other problem is, in the case of Atlanta is a good example, is that the suburbs now are just as pricey as the city, which is something we don't talk about. Alpharetta costs just as much as it does to live in Atlanta. So you may not be able to afford Atlanta. You definitely can't afford Alpharetta or Roswell or Johns Creek or Milton. So where do you go? You go to South Fulton. You go to Southwest DeKalb. And so the counties themselves are starting to gentrify because they are closest to where the things you want, or the easiest to build upon the lifestyle that you want now. So yeah, the marketplace is going to be different. And that's just not Atlanta. That's across the U.S. Like even like in New York, people talk about all the exits from there. Those people just moving to Long Island. They're moving to Westchester County, which is right outside the Bronx. They're moving to Jersey, Jersey City, Hoboken. They're not for real leaving New York, like the metro area. They're just moving to like a more affordable space that they can own. Well,
they probably still work in those city centers. They're just commuting in and out, which makes transportation even shittier.
Right. And the other thing is too, like work from home, in the regards to that, work from home actually makes it now, this is going to sound like counterintuitive. Work from home means that the transit option that you have has to be better than being at home. And I mean, this is not just trains and buses. This is like,
totally.
if you live in, like, if you had the opportunity to work 100% at home and you live in Roswell now, but you hate living in Roswell because of the traffic, you can move. Like, and I don't mean just out of Atlanta, I mean like out of the state. And so now your transit option just has to be much better. And I think Atlanta kind of shot themselves in the foot by only developing roads, because if you live too far, you don't want to drive. Like, all right, I'm gonna start reconsidering Roswell now. You know what?
It doesn't even have to be that far. There's that meme that goes around. It's like Atlanta's an hour from Atlanta.
This is true.
You know, it's really bad. I'll be honest with you. I don't make a ton of money at the job that I do now, but they pay for Ubers up to like $250 a month. That goes quick. I live in Tucker, so I'm on Coolidge. It takes me 45 minutes either way to walk to the closest MARTA bus stop, and then have to wait for that to take me to. So, you know, if I don't have enough money because I've paid child support or whatever else, or I had some emergency come up, because who has savings these days?
Right.
You know, then I have to walk 45 minutes in the rain, which I've done. I sound like an old man. One way or the other to get the bus to the train, then the train to work. It's a 2-hour commute for me from Tucker to Midtown where the office is. And that's only a 15-minute drive with no traffic.
Yeah.
2 hours. So, and I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for me. There's a million people who are on that bus every single day and they've never had an option, and they aren't lucky enough that they have a job that pays for Uber pool and stuff. But my God, man, like systemically, it's so difficult to figure out where to live in this city. I've bounced around a lot because I've tried living in other areas, and it ultimately comes down to affordability for me. You know, I'm like, I live here because I can afford to live here. I lived in Stone Mountain, you know, and it was not like, it was a bit of a dangerous area.
Yeah.
But I didn't care because I was paying $800 $800 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, you know? Right. And I was like, I had plenty of space. I had my dogs with me. I was happy. So, you know, I was going to ask you, what do you say to somebody who is trying to be mindful about being a potential gentrifier? But in a way, it's almost a moot point if you make under a certain, if you find yourself in a socioeconomic bracket where you're making under $60,000 a year, you sometimes don't even have a fucking choice.
Yeah.
You just go where you can go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that I tell this to I've done this for at least 10 years now. I tell this to everyone my speeches is, there's a spectrum of gentrification. Unless your name is Jeff Bezos, you can always be, I'm dead serious about this. You can always be gentrified, right?
Yeah.
So unless you're at the very end of the spectrum, you can always be gentrified, like period. And I think one of the things we're going to start seeing now is that it's not just the burbs and other counties. It's like everyone is a gentrifier in a sense that has, or they're going to be gentrified. And that's not a good relationship for anyone to have. And I think it's a microcosm of the economy that we've kind of built over the last 30 or so years. Cities just accelerate things that already exist, right?
Yeah.
That's just what they're good for. So if it was really good about things, cities are good. Cities are really good at accelerating. If it's really bad, they're also really good at doing that. I'm glad that you want to be mindful of where you are. I do think there is caveats to being that too, because even though you're white, if you're coming into a neighborhood, like you said, that maybe all black, but you're making the same amount of money as that person, on paper, you can't really gentrify them. But what we do know is like how race and class mix, in the sense that if somebody sees a white guy with his dog, even though you make the same amount of money as the people in your neighborhood do, if enough of you move in like that, people will still bring economic development just because of the color of your skin, which is unfortunate. But and all that's going to do is price you out later on. It'll price out your black neighbors first or your brown neighbors first. Then it'll price you out, and then we'll be back at the same cycle. So I think I'm glad you'll be mindful of that, but also be mindful that, you know what, being a good neighbor for yourself is treating respect to the neighborhood, you know, not acting like you're owning it or you're entitled to it, but also understanding that eventually if this continues and more people come in who look like you or who have more money than you, this is going to happen. And you'll probably have to be thinking about where to move at again until we find a better solution.
100%. I want to ask, because I know, you know, a lot of this stuff can be really like emotionally, intellectually draining. A lot of these topics are really difficult, and I'm a big advocate of self-care. there's an episode with my friend Sogan. She's a Sunni Muslim, and she does wellness therapy. And we talked a good bit. She's actually going to come back on the show so we can talk more about like how do you take care of yourself. So when you're constantly like, projecting out into the universe, like I care, I'm empathetic, I want to hear your stories, and then you're receiving in kind all of these things. There's this like sort of transactional thing. I use this term a lot with prayer and everything else, but it's also with the universe. It's like, I'm giving you all of me, and then you're giving me all of you, and I'm fucking tired. So
Yeah.
when do you take moments with everything going on in the world to kind of step back? When do you sense in your spirit, like, I got to get off social media for the day, man. I just don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the emotional bandwidth. I'm going to cry. I'm going to break down. How do you take care of yourself?
You know what? I used to, because my leg is really, really not in a good space. It will be better soon. But I used to always be more disciplined about running and walking. Like running for me is just definitely my exercise of choice. It keeps me balanced.
Okay.
I think I spend way too much time on social media. So what I've had to do now is just simply like put my phone somewhere else. Like I had my ringer turned up really, really loud unless my brother needs to call me. And that's pretty much it. My brother, my best friend, my brother and like four of my best friends. And like, that's pretty much it. Like if it's a business related call, I have it like where I can just read like the thing online. I can hear the voicemail online. But I'm just like, all right, I'm spending way too much time on social media because now I don't run. I'm out of balance. So what I've been doing right now is I've had to do this thing where I have a hard shut off on my phone, like period. At a certain point in time, the phone goes off, right? The other one is too, because I'm with my aunt, I can't be on the phone as much as like other people can. Like a lot of times I just leave it on and leave it running, but which is not good for your battery, by the way. But like because I'm my aunt, like she has a set schedule of doing everything. Like I can't change that. So in a way, it kind of keeps me moving at a certain space. But in terms of like relaxing for me, it used to be cooking and exercising, but now because of COVID and like everything else, like my whole schedule is slowly coming back into whack. So for right now, it's been like, honestly, just like turning off the phone. And I have not just prayer time, but it's like quiet time, like in the morning in particular, like she's asleep, the neighborhood is asleep. So like between like 6 and like 10 a.m., like it's just quiet. Like my aunt, I'm getting her ready and stuff like that for the day and all of that. But it's just basically me, aunt, and everything is quiet. So like that's like my time to get stuff done. So that's just when I try to like maximize the most of that entire experience. And so that's what's working for me now. But like I definitely want more sleep. But that's kind of where I'm at this point.
What would your so I had this question in here, and it kind of feeds into what we were just talking about with self-care. But you now as an adult, if you could go back to you as like a teenage kid, where if you look at a lot of the protests that are going on right now, there are a lot of kids out there,
Yeah.
And that's awesome. I mean, my oldest son, he'll be 16 in December, but he wants to be down here where there's stuff going on so he can go to these protests and participate. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
But I also know that he, like you and I are talking about, is way too plugged in to the point where he's not taking any time for self-care. And I can see the stress and strain fractures,
Yeah.
in his demeanor. So if you could talk to like a young King Williams, what would you say to yourself? What advice would you give yourself right now?
I want to answer both. I want to start with your son first, if you don't mind, which is I would say for him, the phone is meant to be addictive, right? So I know you're going to keep repeating that to him. Plus you might be dad, so he might not like still like fully like listen, but like the reality of it is this.
I give him a wide leash, a long leash.
Like at a certain point in time, you got to just, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That person, your friends, your buddies, whatever crazy thing you saw on YouTube, it will be there. Let it go. Like you got to physically like take it away, isolate it, and understand in particular that you're going to have withdrawal symptoms and you're going to come back to it for a while. It's like an addict. Like you are literally an addict right now. You got to start separating yourself and tell them like, it's okay if you come back, and it's okay if you come back tomorrow. You keep making mistakes, but the idea is to break your habit. The iPhone, if he has one, they tell you how much screen time. Just your goal every single day is to use 30 minutes of less screen time per day. That's it. 30 minutes of less screen time than that per day.
It's big. I mean, that's a big chunk.
Yeah. So like, I mean, again, I understand that they're going to be addicted to that. Like that's just something I just see that. You got to be honest with you. But the thing
they're meant to be.
Yeah, they're designed for that mess. But I would say to a younger version of myself, which is really learn the text about doing the film work of it, because you're obviously smart. You obviously really to sit down and learn how to use the equipment ahead. The second thing is put something out, even if it's bad, every single day until you get better at it. So that's the two things I would say.
Okay.
So, because that could
like
be a
like
bit
in
of
a
a
blog
perfection.
or in video
Just
or
whatever it is. That could be a bit of a perfectionist. It takes me forever to do anything, not because I can't do it, because I'm so like, this isn't good, throw it away. This isn't good, throw it away. So I would say that to my younger self.
So and you write a good bit as well. Like how does that, and I can relate. I'm very much a perfectionist. I'm thinking as we're talking, I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. Maybe if I'd said that better, constantly editing myself and fact checking myself. How do you manage to get articles out? Because I think it would make me insane having to have like because you wrote is it the supporter report?
Yes.
So how did you come up? How did you match up with deadlines if you're a perfectionist?
I missed every one of my deadlines, to be honest with you. The difference is Maria let it slide because Maria Supporter, who's the owner and founder of the Supporter Report, her editors let it slide because they like the voice that I have. And a lot of writers don't have a voice, and to be honest with you, they learn about. She was like, it was reversed when I came to her. I already had a voice. I didn't have the mechanics of like being a professional writer. So like, you know what? And it was a different challenge for her and the editors, which is like, this is a cool space because most of the time you're just writing, editing, punctuating, getting it out, right? But this one was like, you know what? It took me like 2 or 3 editors to get with it, but I'm glad I learned from all of them. But it was just like, you're a different type of writer in the sense that like what we are, because when people read my writing, they resonate with it in a different way, right? Yeah. And so with the newsletter, I have 2 styles of writing. One of which is closest like the reporty kind of, which is what I do part of the newsletter called the update, which is if you read it, it's just like I have one after I talk to you now, I got to put it out before midnight, which is just like, all right, here's the top stories of the day. Boom, boom, boom. Here's like 3 to 4 sentences about it. As much as people as much as you think that's easy, what you're really like, I'm literally researching every single thing that you read in those 3 sentences. And even though you're getting those 3 sentences, I probably spent 2 hours a day over the last few days on each 2 particular things to give you these 3 sentences. And that takes up a lot of time. And then the other side is like the more deep divey kind of like, this is real, like, this is what you need to know, this is knowledge and stuff like that. And the thing I'm starting to do again this week is like the more personal narratives, which is some people love the supporter report, which is how I fit into the world of everything. And so
I love that.
I tell people that those are 3 different styles of writing. And unfortunately, I try to put myself on deadlines. I write every single morning. I'm also writing a book on Living Walls, this art organization here in Atlanta. And I know
Monica Campagna.
Yeah, she is so mad at me right now. She should be, because I am 4 months behind. I told her I have it done beforehand.
She's used to working with artists. I'm sure she's.
I know, but now Monica is generally like one of the sweetest, most gentle, beautiful souls people I've ever met. Like, people say somebody has a beautiful soul, like Monica generally does. Like, she actually really genuine. So, and I'm trying to get that finished too. But like, the thing is,
that's so cool. I didn't know you were doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I haven't told anybody because I'm like, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, with Monica, and that book in particular, I'm writing on that every day, but it's not good. But right, but I look back a week ago, I'm like, damn, this is really good. But the problem is, that's a different type of writing. So really, I'm writing in 4 different languages every single day. Okay. And so even though I put myself on a time, like I told you, that 6 to 10 period, where it's basically just me and my aunt, I'm doing stuff with her, but I still have a little bit more free time. It always takes longer than you think, the research, the writing, and you have kids, you know this, you never can fully be 100% engaged. So what I have to do is the time I do have, I have to be 100% locked in. If I know I only got 30 minutes, as much as I want to put out that article, I just know it's not going to happen in 30 minutes. As much as I want to give Monica this chapter, I know it's just not going to happen because I only got 14 minutes. And so I'm just like, I'm going to give it my best. And my best, when I put it together, like, okay, this is actually really good. And so that's what I've been doing. And so it's something I want to get out of. But right now, just the scenario is like, this is just where you are. So maximize being more efficient, maximize being better at the time you have. So.
Totally. All right. That's awesome. I figured I feel like everybody in Atlanta knows Monica. She's just such a phenomenal person. I'm glad we brought her up. I'd love to have her on the show. I have 2 questions for you, if that's cool.
Yeah, because I got to head out soon.
I know. Gotcha. Okay. I don't want to keep you too long.
No. I like this. This is fun. This is the longest one I've ever done.
Dude, I tell people all the time, they're like, I got an hour. And I was like, all right, That's what you said. And
Nah,
then
you actually got a gift with this, man. Dead ass serious. You got a real gift with this.
I appreciate that. That means a lot, especially coming from you. I have to ask you because I talk to a lot of people from all over the country, but you're from Atlanta and I am too. So we cover a lot of really controversial stuff on this show. Not in an inflammatory way, in a way that's safe. We want to be a safe place
Just
for people.
Say what's on your mind.
Listen, man, I need to ask you.
I've been around death. Like, whatever you're going to say is not going to scare me. So, like, you got to, like, just say it.
Well, I want this to sound stupid now, but I want to ask you about your favorite restaurants because people will argue about food ad nauseum. Listen, I've had pizza, wings, and barbecue. We have gotten into, like, not screaming matches, but close to it at work, where we're like, dude, people in Atlanta are so emphatic about their favorite places. And I'll tell you, my favorite barbecue place is Daddy D's.
Oh, you know, I've never been.
Oh, well, it's going to get, speaking of gentrification, they're going to bulldoze it.
No. What is this? What is supposed to be happening?
Well, the city of Atlanta bought that whole strip right there from where the archives are all the way down to Oakland Cemetery. So that's going to be like a green space and a parking space.
Oh, God.
I know.
Okay. The green space I'm okay with, but the parking space and then tearing down something that's probably like a historic landmark is for what? For what?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. But anyway, I have opinions. I also like pizza. I don't think pizza is such a big deal in Atlanta because we're not New York and it really ultimately doesn't matter. But barbecue and wings, I will like fight. I will die on that hill.
People will fight you over wings in Atlanta. I tell people this all the time. Don't.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. Okay, so I'll tell you my favorite place, and you're gonna laugh. But Publix has incredible wings, man.
People love Publix wings.
Publix wings are good.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not the best, and I also
no, don't qualify that. No, you like them. No qualifications.
Okay. See, I'm already defensive because people argue about this stuff, and I'm ready. I'm ready to be like, no, Publix sucks. But anyway, okay, where do you like to go?
Okay, I'm gonna start at first, which is my favorite restaurant is always the next restaurant I go to. I generally love food. Like I said, I work in hospitality, so I just honestly love food. I'm the person who values the experience of eating a little bit more than the food itself. So I want to preference that. Other thing is, I don't like wings. I just don't like small, like bite-sized foods. Like, just give me a breast, give me a thigh. Like, I don't want like a small piece of food. Like, I actually want to eat like the piece of meat. So that's a me thing. Like, everybody can have wings. I'm not against it. I just give me the meat. Like, that's what I came here for.
Why can't you make the same thing with a chicken breast? I've never understood that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same sauce. Isn't that's kind of what Nashville hot chicken is? Have you had Hattie B's?
Nah. Yes. I think when they first opened.
It's so good. I don't understand why you can't do a chicken wing with a chicken breast. I don't get it.
Hey, you could. Hey.
Did I just break the
That might break the internet. That might break the internet on that one. So funny. I'm trying to think. Okay, the best place I eat it. I always say the next restaurant, but I'm going to be specific. They're both in downtown Decatur, one of which, and they're not the best. I'm going to run down a couple lists. One, all right, we're going to do actual just sheer food, like the actual taste of the food.
Okay.
The first one is Twisted, Twisted Soul? Twisted Cookhouse?
Twisted Soul? Yeah.
Yeah. I like them a lot off of Huff Road. I really like one of my homegirls. Every time we meet up, we always eat over there. I just like their food. I like their food. I like the selection that they have.
They're super good.
Yeah. I don't even know if JCT is still open, but I used to like JCT a lot. They had the short ribs. Their short ribs, they were the best in the city. I enjoy them. There is another place for food. I actually like, in terms of like, this goes in both. This goes in like actual taste of the food. I love Sublime Donuts in particular. Mm-hmm. I like them on the sweet side. I just like they're always doing something interesting. I like the Oreo filled donut that they have. That's money.
Why did you have to say that?
I do. I love it.
I want one.
Yeah. There's also another thing. All right. So for actual hamburgers, I'm a hamburger person, and there's Fred's Meat and Bread and Krog Street Market. That is gnarly. I cannot stress that enough. It is good. I like them.
It's so good. Okay. How do you feel about Farm Burger? Because that's my favorite, and people get really mad at me. They're like, it's not the best. Grindhouse is better, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I like Grindhouse. I haven't had Farm Burger in 9 years. I can't remember what it tastes like. I'm gonna be honest with you.
I'm gonna need you to go get some farm burger.
I probably would. I just
And
cannot tell you what it tastes like anymore.
report back.
All right, I will.
It's so good. It's so good.
It might. It's probably good. I just honestly could not tell you. I just like I don't.
Yeah.
Remember.
All right. Last question about food. What about the varsity? Yay or nay?
I'm a yay on it. Here's the thing, though.
Good.
The varsity.
Thank you.
I know a lot of people clown the varsity, and it's not like everyone. This is how you're supposed to do the varsity.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do the varsity as you're on a date with somebody. This needs to be a transition thing to something else. Like, this is hard to do. I used to do that. And there was something I didn't say earlier about the interfaith part of it. There was the I can say the best girl, but the woman I've learned the most in my life in terms of dating. That's the place we would go to, and I was in college, and the food wasn't good, but it was a place where you're young. Because Georgia State still had it wasn't Georgia Tech dorm, it was Georgia State. We would walk over to the varsity. We both knew it wasn't good, but it was a good place to all right, before we go out, what we're gonna do for this. And it's actually one of the cool things before date. I think sometimes you should stack your dates, and the varsity is a good place to kind of pre-date, where you kind of just talk, sit about things, really assess what's going to go on, kind of get the nerves out. Or at the end of the date, and that's kind of always it for that one. So
I love that. So yes, without being graphic though, you got to be careful what you eat pre-date there.
Yeah. No, we already know. Me and her both. So this is what we would do is if we were going out, we definitely gonna be walking. So we will go get a Mars or something like that. What we do is we'll get some onion rings. We'll talk about
okay.
All right, cool. What we're gonna do? Obviously, we have the mints and stuff like that. But
frosted orange or something.
Yeah, or ice cream. Honestly, a lot of times just ice cream. Think about it, or some dish wasn't gonna be super crazy.
Not like a chili cheese slaw dog.
No. You don't want to do that.
On a date, are you kidding me? No, you need to be able to be in your home for the next 48 hours if you're going to eat that.
True. If you meet a girl who eating a chili dog on the first time, this is either going to be your wife or this is going to be the worst story you've ever told anybody. There's no in between on
Right.
this.
You're either immediately in love or you're disgusted and you're never going to talk to her again.
True. I believe food is the best way to date anybody. I don't believe in going to the movies. I don't believe in going to fancy. I'm just walk and eat. That's what you need to do.
Movies are such. See, I want to connect with you because I want to find out. I wish we had more time, so I would love to talk about dating, but maybe I can have you back.
Shit.
Maybe I can have you back.
I'm here now. We'll do it now. While we're here. We got 10 minutes on the clock. Let's go.
All right. Okay. So I'll ask that instead of my last question.
You can ask both. Shit.
Well, kind of was I was basically just going to ask you what does compassion, empathy, and love look like in today's world?
I can do that too.
But I also think that feeds into dating because for me, and maybe it's because I'm a little bit older now and it might have been different when I was younger, but I don't want to waste a lot of time spending money, going out, and we'll talk about, I don't know, I don't even know anymore what people talk about on dates. Kim Kardashian. I'm so out of touch. Because if I joked around with this girl that I'm talking to right now, and I was like, if we don't talk about childhood trauma and exchange stories and you know what I mean? Maybe even shed a tear by the end of the date. It wasn't a good date.
Whoa, that's a lot going on there.
We go deep, but it's a natural. You and I have been going deep this whole time. We haven't talked in forever. It's just a natural thing because I genuinely want to know who you are, what makes you you, and you can't find that out by talking about oh my God, did you see that movie? It was so stupid.
Oh yeah,
you really got to get in there.
Yeah, you know what? No, before we get to that, I actually want to. I'm going to start here. We're going to end on compassion, empathy, and love.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to start here first. We'll come back to compassion, empathy, and love. For me in particular, looks like the love I've received from my parents, from my aunt, and now I had to give to my parents from my aunt. So it's the cyclical cycle of it. They're all, and myself, and all in different stages of our lives. And compassion is, I see this now how my parents see me as somebody where I've been at in my life and what I've done and what I've been through. Empathy is how I deal with my aunt, how the rest of my family deals with my aunt, because she did not ask to have a stroke. She did not ask to be paralyzed. She did not ask to be nonverbal. She did not ask to be dependent upon someone for every single thing that she does. And so we had to bring not only compassion to her, but the empathy that understands that, you know what, we will never be in the position that you are in. And so we got to respect that and be there. And then love is just I always believe in agape love. And I'm one of those people when it comes to the 5 love languages, shout out to one of the girls I dated. She gave me that book. But I'm an acts of service person. But for me, love always looks like being in service of something. I've been a server my whole life. I take care of my aunt. And we didn't get into this podcast, but I've seen my dad have to take care of my grandma before she passed. And so or other people, when my mom was like ill for a minute. So for me, love is something that you show, something that you do, and especially if you're going to be of service to someone. I mean, pure, no qualms. There's no ulterior motive. Like, there's no advantage to be made to of giving yourself to someone fully with all compassion, of loving them, of showing them that my love is being here for you. My love is being present with you. My love is hearing for you. The empathy is like, I may not be in your situation, but I need to be adaptive to that and sensitive to that. And then compassion of being like, no matter what, I'm going to be here for you, to listen for you, to laugh with you, to hold your hand, because that's what that means. And so I want to answer that before we got to the dating thing, because I feel like we should end on that.
That's beautiful. Oh my God, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, it's all good. I hope people listen. And so the last one, I think the dating thing, which is this, because of all those things I said, like you said, like I think it's good that you know what your first date is, or like what you believe is a good date. For me, a good date, and this is for myself, and I would say for other people. So for myself, a good date is one in which I feel as if I guess like that me and you both feel comfortable and talking like we normally talk. Because first date, you know how it is. Like, it's just like, you're trying to look right. You're not trying to look stupid. You're not trying to order the wrong thing. You're not trying to make sure your breath stained. Like, you're trying to make sure you ain't got nothing in your eye. Like, or you're trying to get the conversation. Like you said, trying to get, like, you're too much about it. And so that's, to me, like the standard of what's good.
Yeah.
And so at that point in time too, I think that for everyone else, so this is what I say to people. That's for me. For everyone else, I think a standard is, do you feel as if at the end of this particular date that truly assessing yourself that this is somebody that fits in one of the three categories, right? This is your friend, this is somebody you're going to F with, or this is somebody who is family. Or, so if that's a good date, so like the 3F.
That's good.
Or sometimes a foe, because sometimes people be crazy. So so 100%. Or forgettable, or like forgettable, because sometimes like you don't need to be there. It's just like, all right, that happened once, voila. So,
or fun. There's a lot of F's.
Yeah, a lot of them. Well, fun. I think fun can kind of go. Or fun can be on its own too. I think also too what you said too. I think the movies are a bad idea. Just don't do it. I think
it's a terrible idea.
Don't even go to like number 7 or 8 on the list, because of what it is. It's a very like, it's quiet, it's static. You got to look forward. It's just not the right look. Don't do that one. No. I think these are my tips for best first dates. And I told a lot of my homegirls this, and they hated me for it, but it actually works. I think no date in the first early stages should be above $50. Period.
Man, preach.
Here's why. I know a lot of women get upset with it, but I'm like, all right, so because a lot of them are now married, and I'm like, yeah. But like a lot of these are my women. I'm saying women I've talked to, but a lot of them are just my homegirls. So
friends who are like, you should spend over $50 on a first date.
Well, yeah, friends are my homegirls too. So like, I'm gonna preface that, but a lot of times, a lot of women, especially like the friends of my homegirls, they will be caught up in the fact that you said 50, like they're trying to say you're trying to make it cheap. And I'm like, no, I'm not trying to make it cheap. What I'm trying to do is 2 things. One, I'm trying to force myself to be creative, and also trying to force myself to actually listen to you. Because like women don't understand, for as a man, we're so focused about not the things I said before, about how I look, how am I talking correct. We're also worried about how much it's going to cost, right? But if you set aside like a hard dollar amount that I'm not going above this, it forces you now to not only be creative, but also forces you to kind of be more in the moment, be more spontaneous, do more things that will actually make you memorable for the date itself.
Totally.
And so I think people, they first hear that and they get upset, then they come back. I'm like, it's not an assessment of your value. What it is it's lowering the barriers for me to get to know you and you to get to know me. And so I would do this for a lot of my dates. Like you can't really do that in New York. I mean, in Atlanta now, but I would be like, that would be pretty much, I'm like, hey, let's meet up at a park. Let's meet up at Central Park and take it from there, right? 'Cause if you're at Central Park, the cool thing is like, no matter how touristy it is, you meet there on a Saturday afternoon, like in case like summertime, like this is kind of hot. So you meet up at like 7 or 6, like actually probably 6. Let's meet up at 6 at Central Park. You walk around, meet some stuff. Oh, you can do roller skating for like $7 each. You get some ice cream. You can like, it's cheap, but it's memorable. You're walking, you're talking, and it forces you at a certain point in time. Like I told you, for me, a good standard date is when you have to be comfortable with yourself, because no matter how pretty she's looking or how cool you're looking, and if you're walking, you're doing something, you have to let that guard down. You just can't be that person continually. So that's always say, if you can, go to a park first. If you can't, the other one I say is go to a coffee shop. Like before, obviously these are all pre-COVID things, mind you guys. Right. But go to a coffee shop, go to a park first. The other one is too, I would say sometimes if you're more of an drinker, like go for the happy hour and only for the happy hour. Say, hey, this is for a happy hour. Can you meet me here? We're going to do 2 for 1. That's always the thing I say. The other one is, I think this is really
Good
for
idea.
a first date. Also too, which is nobody thinks about too. Don't do stuff like bowling and mini golf first. That's like a 5th or 6th date. You got to actually know each other. That's because it requires too much touch. But what you can do in between time though is you want to pick something like I did this before. This actually doesn't seem like it works, but it actually works. This is a 2-parter. You got to start one place and end at another. So I would say all the time, like it's got to be something that's a different kind of experience. One of which is, hey, can you meet up here? Like I would do this with the DeKalb Farmers Market. So, but hey, let's go meet up at the DeKalb Farmers Market for a second, and then from there, there's like a coffee shop nearby. So now I'm pairing 2 smaller, cheap things. There's an experience. You talk to me about food. We're talking about food, what we like to eat, what we don't like to eat. So I'm actually getting to know you before we eat. And so if you're not fully hungry, go to coffee. Or if it's not, I already know what restaurants it is. A taco restaurant, there's an Italian restaurant. They're all relatively under $50. So boom, it's down the street. I'm already thinking like that. So that's always thinking about either the combo date, which is
so good.
So I do okay with this.
That's so good, man. And plus, like, I think people appreciate that you've put that much thought into it, you know? It's not like, let's just go to a bar. Let's go to, like, whatever is popular. I don't even know. Is bar taco still a thing?
Bar tacos, yeah. Don't take that girl unless she's your girlfriend to bar taco. Don't do it. She's going to order, like, 4 martinis and, like, 6 tacos for $79. So, like, she got to be your girlfriend.
I'm such a cheap ass. I'd rather go to Buford Highway and get, like,
actually, that's a better day. Like, the girls I would date would be like, hey, we're going to Buford Highway.
That's where I usually go. I love going over there because you can do that like 3-parter thing. Like you can go to the Buford Highway's Farmers Market, you can go to Taco Veloz, and then you can go to like Mozart Bakery or Sweet Hut or whatever.
Yeah,
we're on the same page.
Sweet Hut's like the lick. I think you got to know the type of girl you're going with though, because a lot of girls I date be like really girly girls. So like they're not. I mean, they're women, but I'm obviously, but like. So, like, they're going to have the hair done. They're going to wear heels, stuff like that. So, I'm like, cool. If that's the case, here's the thing. If we're going to Buford Highway, I'll pick you up. What we're going to do is this. I know you love bar taco, but trust me, we're going to go out. We're going to go to 3 different restaurants. We're going to sample the tacos at each different restaurant. So, we're going to sample.
Dang, you're so smooth, man. That's smart.
So, that's what I would be doing because, listen, she still want to be glammed up, and that's cool. I'm going to be like, all right, so let me give you a little bit of me, which is a little bit more low key, but you love experience. You love good food. So, how about this? We're going to get 1 drink, a margarita at each restaurant, plus those 2 tacos, 1 chicken, 1 beef. We're going to do that for 3 restaurants. At the end of it, you let me know how you feel about it. And then, so at the point of that, we got a whole new experience. She's getting this, she gets to go out. Now she's getting a new experience. She's going to tell her friends about it. Even if the date is bad, she's now got the experience of like, I went with him somewhere and now I know something that you don't. And the other thing is too, for me, I learn about the restaurant because even if it's Buford Highway, they're all the same. I mean, not all the same. In your mind, you're thinking they're all the same. It's just in the next restaurant. I always try to learn something about, okay, where did this restaurant come from? Where did tacos come from?
Yeah,
so when I get there,
Colombian or Venezuelan or
so that way I got it. Like I ain't got to worry about like talking points now because like okay, because like you said before, okay, cool. Oh, this is like Venezuelan tacos, and Venezuela's tacos are known for X, Y, and Z. And then she's like, oh, have you ever been to Venezuela? Like, now I would love to go. And I learned that like boom, I'm coming through.
Precipitates conversation.
Yeah. Every single time. And then the next taco place, she's not gonna know what it is. I know what it is. So hey, we did Venezuela's first. Now we're gonna go get Korean tacos. And so boom. Oh, have you ever had Korean? No, okay, let's go. And the next one's like traditional boom. The date is more memorable. It's under $50. And now you're in a different ball game with her.
I'm totally with you, man. It's gonna be interesting to see how we date the way that you and I do after
COVID. I
don't even know if there's an after, but even during. You know what I mean?
Interested in that too. I've heard people who said they went on COVID dates, and I'm just like, that's a different world to me.
I went on a COVID date. I wore a mask.
How did that go?
It was horrible.
What, it was like virtual, like in person?
It was in person.
Okay.
We went. One of my favorite things, and hopefully no one is listening to this. Kind of like, but I love going to the drive-in, the Starlight Drive-In. I like to go. We'll go to like the farmers market or something beforehand and get some food, and then go and share it. And like I was wearing a mask the whole time, you know.
Gotcha.
But she didn't, and I was like, okay,
gotcha.
Yay! Can you please something? Yikes! Because I thought my understanding was that like we were going to show up and both be wearing masks and no kissy or touchy, and that's all well and good. But just to see if we vibed in person, you know, we did not.
Right.
Person.
Well, you know what? You learn something. I think it's actually better that you did it like that because you got to communicate more about, hey, listen, the next girl, like, hey, when I say social distance, I mean mask. What do you mean? So kind of thing. Like dead ass. Like just mention it.
I know. I'm a people pleaser, man. I've got to do better about that.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. I am so appreciative of your time. You have
Thank
such
you
a
for
beautiful heart, and I honestly like listening to you. I think you have so many stories to tell, and I really hope that you do tell them. I encourage you,
Lord willing,
man.
I hope I am.
You live long and prosper, and share your
Same to you,
stories.
man.
You've got some really powerful ones, and I'd love to stay in touch and keep talking as much as possible. And definitely let me know about that Living Walls book, man, when it comes out. If you guys have a launch party, even if it's on Zoom.
Yeah. Hopefully Monica's not upset with me. I got to do that tonight after I talk to you. So hopefully she's not super upset with me.
She knows who I am, so you can tell her that I kept you. She knows me from my nonprofit world where I worked with trash water. But I just have to do one quick thing to wrap up here, and then I can let you get on with it so you don't get in trouble. We'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we've covered today and any other topics we may have discussed. You can join us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all at WeGotSpiritHowBoutYou. You can also find all of our episodes on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com, WeGotSpiritHowBoutYou, and look for all of our audio content on Spotify and iTunes as well. Be sure you spell it We Got Spirit How About You, because we're folksy, not fancy, so don't go complicating. Thanks for giving us a listen. We hope that you'll continue joining us on this weird, wild journey into exploring the religions of the world. I think of myself as kind of a platypus made up of spare parts when it comes to religion, but I adore the idea of a benediction or a doxology. I have my own version that I like to do at the end of each episode, which is, may you find love, light, joy, and peace in the people and things around you, and may you be well and be kind to this planet we call home and those who inhabit it. And you guys, real quick, is there anything that you want to plug? I'll link anything you want on our social media so people can find you.
Yeah. So really two things. One, if you could, this is just please for anyone else, please follow me on social media at I Am King Williams. Please follow my documentary, The Atlanta Way. So again, on all social media platforms, it's the same, which is at I Am King Williams or at The Atlanta Way. Also, if you haven't already, please sign up for my newsletter at iamkingwilliams.substack.com. Again, iamkingwilliams.substack.com. Oh, can you do me one thing, though, in particular for you, Josh, which is, can you send, I know you're not going to use audio, but can you send me the video of this? Because I want to put it on my YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So
Thanks again for doing this, man. This has been awesome. And listen, I'm expecting great things out of you.
Thank you for that.
I'm going to check in with you every once in a while and be like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah. No, I like it. So yeah, let me know.
Thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.